It all starts on an ordinary day in the quiet town of Aldea. Suddenly, someone shows up saying they finally found him. A young woman with red hair grabs Kai's arm and begs him to leave with her. Another girl, who looks identical, appears smiling and asks him to hurry up. Kai just lets out a weary sigh, not understanding all the fuss. A little while later, the young man tries to relax by grabbing a bite to eat at a tavern. However, another girl pops up out of nowhere, claiming she found him. This new young woman desperately asks Kai to accompany her to her estate. An older nun appears right behind her, smiling at the confused young man. On another day, a blonde girl shows up demanding that he go play with Remy. Kai tries to decline, saying he is busy, which leaves the girl shocked. She doesn't accept the excuse and starts dragging him off by force to go play. A blonde woman in a hat gently asks him just given a little bit. Kai wonders how he ended up here and decides to look back at his past. It all started during a dark night in the middle of a dense forest. A hostile man shouts to get Kai's attention, calling him a rookie. Kai responds, startled, as he realizes he is now a public executioner. The man orders him to watch the camp while the others are asleep. He even tells Kai to harm the hostages if they start making any noise. Left alone, the protagonist laments the cruelty of that terrible situation. Kai sits in silence, trying to process everything that is happening. He holds his head in despair, not understanding how his life changed so much. His last memory on Earth was suffering a terrible car accident. Upon waking up in that unknown body, he was completely lost. Suddenly, as he looks at the starry sky, he notices something very familiar. He realizes he has reincarnated inside the game he used to play in his life. The problem is that he is now part of the group of terrible villains. Desperate, the young man wonders why he was so unlucky in his fate. At that moment, a strange noise coming from a wagon catches his attention. As he approaches slowly, he comes across a large iron cage. Inside, he spots some girls trapped and realizes they are the hostages. He remembers that the villains in this game usually meet a cruel and tragic end. Fearing the future, Kai decides the best option is to escape as soon as possible. To manage his escape, he begins looking for a map and some money. After finding the map of the forest, he feels confident to start his getaway. However, before leaving alone, he feels he needs to do one last thing. Holding a lantern, he approaches the cage and startles the prisoners. Quite directly, Kai proposes that they all run away with him that night. The girls locked in the cage seem extremely weak and frightened. The sudden proposal leaves the young woman confused and unsure what to think. The girl with red hair gets annoyed, thinking it is just a cruel joke. The other hostage asks for at least one reason to trust him after everything. Kai hesitates for a moment under the distrustful gazes of the prisoners. Noticing his silence, the redhead mocks him, saying he has no answers. The young man quickly lies, saying it took him a long time to manage to infiltrate. Even knowing he is lying, he needs them to trust him right now. Kai insists they hurry because he is at risk of death if he is caught. The redhead laments, revealing that her leg is injured and she cannot run. The white-haired girl explains that she cannot flee either because she is blind. To make matters worse, the little blonde girl is completely sick and has no strength left in the cage. They fear that even if they escape, they will end up perishing along the way. Even so, the redhead is grateful to know that Kai is not an enemy. Kai remains silent while listening to the venting of the young prisoners. Suddenly, a small, trembling hand moves weakly on the floor. The little blonde girl begs for help with her last bit of strength. Upon hearing the little girl's desperate plea, Kai is quite shocked. The young man clenches his fist, determined not to leave the girls there. He states that running away is better and promises to carry anyone who cannot walk. The girl with red hair is surprised by his determination. Kai guarantees that he knows the region well and that everything will turn out fine. He asks the other two to come closer so they can start the escape. Carrying the weakest girls, the group finally leaves the spot. On the way, Kai realizes that his new body is extremely strong and muscular. He quickly pushes those thoughts away and focuses on continuing to run. The young man feels relieved to notice that no one is chasing the group. He begins to plan their destination using the map he took from the camp. Kai discovers that the names of the locations are exactly the same as in his game. This proves that he truly possesses the valuable information from the system. With this knowledge, he knows exactly where he should lead the group. After a long walk, they finally spot a large treehouse. Quite confused, the blind girl asks what mysterious place that is. Kai answers that the place is a secret hideout he prepared himself. The young man then spots an old stone tombstone with magical writing. He asks the girls to wait a moment while he resolves something. Kai tries to remember the magic word needed to activate the place. A glowing magic circle appears and opens the secret entrance to the shelter. Upon entering, the young man complains a little about the dust, but is happy it worked. Very carefully, he lays the debilitated young Remy on a soft bed. The redhead is suspicious and says he is definitely not a common agent. The other girl is also impressed by the structure of that shelter. Kai disguises his surprise and tries to act as if everything were under control. The redhead shows she is very worried about Remy's serious health condition. He remembers that he must have kept some useful items in that chest. The girl asks desperately if he has any food to give Remy. Kai opens the secret compartment looking for something that might help. He is relieved to find several of his rare game potions there. The young man offers the medicine, but the redhead thinks a common one won't be enough. Upon looking closer at the glowing bottle, she is left speechless. Kai guarantees that that special potion is different from anything they know. The redhead points, shocked, recognizing the unique color of that magic liquid. He remembers he kept only the rarest and most valuable items in the game. The legendary potion is capable of healing wounds, hunger, and any poison. With a confident look, the young man hands the valuable bottles to them. Kai realizes he has dozens of them and will never need money again. Shocked by the item's wealth, the redhead asks who he really is. The protagonist is slightly tense when questioned in that way. He advises her not to ask difficult questions for her own good. Next, he says the other two must also drink the rare potion. He jokes, saying he doesn't want to have to carry anyone on his back again. Touched, the blind girl asks if there is also a magic cure for her. With a smile, Kai confirms that he has a cure and hands the special potion to her. Holding the magic bottle, the blind girl can hardly believe her luck. Then, Kai approaches little Remy, saying that she will also receive the cure. The young man very carefully helps the debilitated little girl drink the entire rare elixir. Immediately, Remy's body begins to glow with intense healing energy. Kai watches that impressive scene, fascinated by the potion's incredible power. Upon opening her eyes, completely healed, the little blonde girl thanks him shyly. The young man asks her to just rest, as the potion does not cure mental exhaustion. Tears of suffering finally turn into indescribable relief. Looking at the empty bottles, Kai feels very satisfied with the result. The two older girls stand up, feeling their bodies' energy renewed. Kai wonders in secret if he might ask for a good reward when he takes them home. He is interrupted by the weeping of Nina, who can see again, and Karen, who is already walking. The young man feels grateful for freeing them from so much accumulated suffering in captivity. He decides to step away a little to give the happy young woman space and privacy. The next day, the protagonist asks where the girls were kidnapped from. He finds out they came from Aldea, which is more than 2 towns away from there. With that, the young man realizes their journey back will be quite long and difficult. Annoyed, Karen tells him to go complain about it to his former companions. Kai asks if no one knows how to use teleportation magic to speed up the trip. Karen laughs ironically and explains that that legendary magic hardly exists in the world. The young man looks at his attributes and laments having reincarnated as an average hunter. Nina adds that only one person in legendary history used that spell. Kai agrees and decides to change the subject to focus on what really matters now. The protagonist gently asks how they are all feeling that day. Smiling, Nina says she is doing her best to get used to her sight. Karen reveals that her leg is perfect and shows she is sincerely very grateful. Then she asks him not to call her Yule and introduces herself as the noble Karen. The other white-haired girl also introduces herself formally as Nina. Kai confirms that the little girl still sleeping in the comfortable bed is named Remy. He thinks to himself how difficult the names in this new world are to memorize. The young man warns that the plan is to return home, and Karen asks if he will protect her. Quite realistically, the young man answers that he cannot guarantee her safety. Karen is indignant at his answer and wants to know the reason for such coldness. Kai argues that in the real world, there are no absolute certainties for survival. He knows that reality is dangerous and that mistakes in that world can cost lives. The young man explains that they don't know how many enemies exist or how strong they are. The young man suggests that they should avoid direct combat if they want to keep everyone alive. He reminds the girls that everyone there has only one life to be lived. Therefore, he guarantees that he will do absolutely everything in his power to avoid fights. Karen then asks if the young man has already thought of any escape strategy. Kai feels pressured and says it is difficult to answer the question like that. The young man's vague answer leaves the two girls distrustful and confused. He soon explains himself, saying the kidnappers must be on guard in the neighboring town. Since that town is the closest, the enemies will think he fled there. Therefore, the plan is to head south and rent a carriage in the village over there. Worried about the costs, Karen reminds him that they have no coins there. Kai shows that he took plenty of money from the criminals to pay for the carriage. Moved, Nina asks why he is trying so hard to help them. She questions the reason for spending such expensive items on unknown prisoners. Feeling the weight of the question, the protagonist disguises his nervousness with an awkward little laugh. He starts to break into a cold sweat when he remembers that he is a terrible liar when it comes to making up excuses. The young man lies, saying he only saved them because he received strict orders from his superiors. Suddenly, he notices that little Remy was already awake and staring at him in silence. Kai is startled and asks in an awkward way how long the little girl has been awake. Remy answers that she already heard everything, leaving the protagonist even more embarrassed. To change the subject, Kai suggests they take advantage of the dark night to wash themselves in the river. Nina shyly warns that she possesses special purification and cleaning magic. The young man tells them to use it on themselves, while he goes to actually bathe in the river water. Karen thinks it strange for an experienced agent like him not to know how to use such a useful spell. Kai argues that using magic that is too convenient calls for unnecessary attention. Nina then conjures her glowing spell to clean herself and her companions. Meanwhile, the protagonist enjoys a relaxing bath in the river under the twilight light. Later, everyone gathers again around the map to finalize the route. Kai wears heavy, dark metal armor to completely hide his face. Completely protected and unrecognizable, the young man warns that it is time to leave. A week later, at the entrance to the town of Aldia, guards work in an agitated manner. Wearing the heavy armor, the protagonist observes the intense movement at the gate. Karen comments proudly that all that commotion is because they returned safe and sound. The guard captain recognizes the three noble young women and runs relieved to meet them. Karen thanks the guard and points to the armored warrior who saved them. The captain bows deeply, demonstrating his extreme gratitude to the masked hero. He directs the young woman to wait at the guard post because an escort is already coming. Worried about him leaving, Nina asks what the protagonist will do from now on. Kai answers calmly that he intends to stay and rest in that town for some time. Karen insists, wanting to know if he doesn't need to report the mission to his superiors. The mention of superiors makes the young man tense because he doesn't have any real answers. He thinks of a quick excuse to deflect the girl's curiosity about him. The young man refuses any immediate reward and says they can pay him in the future. Exhausted from spending days on constant alert, the protagonist just wants to rest his body. He advises the girls to keep their guard up until they are safe at home. Karen accepts his prudent advice and thanks him from the heart for all the help received. The armored hero calls little Remy to say goodbye before continuing his journey, a little sad about separating from him. The little girl just agrees with the farewell. The young man entrusts their safety to the captain while he watches them leave with the escort. The guard officer insists on thanking him, bowing before his extreme modesty. Kai says goodbye awkwardly and warns that he will enter the town to look for a place. The officer wishes the mysterious hero welcome and clears the way for the warrior. The soldiers observe with much respect as the protagonist walks down the street. The guards whisper, impressed by the imposing presence of that new warrior. The captain states seriously that the man is a true living and scary legend. He says he used evaluation magic and only discovered legendary dungeon items. The mention of high-level dungeons leaves the other soldiers completely stunned. They remember that the hero faced the entire terrible group of kidnappers alone. The captain praises how the warrior prioritized the noble's safety above all else. He guarantees that the young man is a very experienced veteran in the art of survival. The officer laments not having managed to see the face hidden under that armor. One of the soldiers thinks it was wrong for the captain not to have demanded his formal identification. The officer reprimands the guard, saying the noble's savior deserves respect. The soldiers agree that someone so powerful truly deserves special treatment. The guard captain is shocked to hear about the legendary potions. The soldiers reveal that all 3 young women were totally healed of their illnesses. He reports the mysterious hero handed over the rare elixirs without any hesitation. Impressed by the young man's grand feats, the soldier tries to make a joke. The captain becomes serious and orders them to report everything they know to the guild's high command. He demands that the urgent report be sent immediately without any delay. In fact, Karen is the daughter of one of the most noble and important families in the empire. Nina is a descendant of a sacred lineage that founded the kingdom's very church. And little Remy is the heir to the leader of the world's largest commerce organizations. Ignoring their status, Kai used elixirs worth a fortune and refused the reward. Furthermore, he possesses high-level items and appears to be an unbeatable warrior. The captain concludes that the young man can only be from the Imperial elite force called Vertar. Meanwhile, Kai walks calmly, admiring the beautiful streets of the town of Aldia. The place is identical in every detail, the setting of the game he knew so well. He spots the imposing treasure hunter guild shining just ahead. The young man would like to explore the region, but his body is exhausted from fatigue. To make matters worse, he notices that everyone on the street begins to stare at him with astonishment. By staring fixedly at a startled young man, the youth leaves him even more terrified. Kai thought that wearing armor would be something common in the central region of the big city. He forgot that his equipment is very rare and calls attention everywhere he passes. Not wanting trouble, the youth decides to head quickly toward the nearest inn. Children on the street are amazed and shout, praising his stylish armor. A girl runs happily and hugs the metal leg of the youth, who is surprised. In a large mansion, Karen's family celebrates the safe return of the young noblewoman. Karen's father cries desperately, hugging his daughter, who tries to calm him down awkwardly. He explains that he was worried sick and asks for a moment to be able to cry in peace. The man wipes his tears, shocked to learn that her leg was healed by the rare potion. Even with all his influence and wealth, he never managed to obtain this legendary elixir. He finds it unbelievable that an unknown warrior used this treasure so easily. Karen recounts, outraged, that the youth acted with coldness and demanded that she pay him later. The father reads the confused report, asking if the hero acted alone and without anyone's help. The girl is surprised and asks if it wasn't her father himself who sent her rescue. The man denies it, saying that if he knew someone so strong, he would have already healed her leg before. Karen realizes that the youth invented superior orders just to give the group hope. The Duke analyzes the situation, deducing the real intentions behind that heroic act. He believes that the agent had secret information about the kidnappers' group. Karen wants to send official thanks, but her father warns her about the danger of doing that. The man explains that sending a formal letter could cause serious problems for the youth. After all, the identity of a secret Imperial agent must never be exposed to the public. Surprised, the young redhead asks if her father really knows which organization the youth belongs to. The man reveals that he received news that the kidnappers were arrested near Waffer. Upon hearing the name of the place, Karen remembers that Kai already knew of their presence on that route. She finally understands why the protagonist chose take such a long detour on the map. The Duke slams his hands on the table, confirming that his suspicions about the youth were correct. He reveals that the mysterious force that arrested the criminals was the feared Vertar. Karen is in shock upon hearing the name of the legendary Imperial military organization. The Vertar is a secret division controlled directly by the capital to maintain order. Legends say that the team is formed only by the best bounty hunters. They are known as the most ruthless and strong elite in the entire continent. The father concludes that the young man must be a high-ranking commander acting solo. Karen's father asks her never to reveal the true identity of who saved her so as not to betray his goodwill. The man says that they need to pay this debt and that the only way to find him is by looking for his black armor. He then orders Karen to call Lifia so that the two can look for the young man and invite him to come to their mansion. The young woman agrees immediately and runs out in a great hurry to carry out the order received from her father. After Karen's noisy exit, the man sits in his armchair and lets out a deep sigh, showing wariness. The man hopes that the young man is an important member of the organization so as not to be severely punished for using the elixir. He knows that the other influential families in the town who had their daughters saved will think exactly the same way. The next day, at a local inn, Kai savors a delicious meal and is amazed by the taste of the food. The owner of the establishment is quite pleased with the youth's praise and decides to start a friendly conversation. The man asks curiously if Kai is the same mysterious warrior who was wearing that black armor. He celebrates for having guessed correctly and says that Kai is much more polite than most treasure hunters in the region. The merchant asks if the youth came from outside, and Kai just confirms, saying he came from a place very far from there. Suddenly, the establishment's door is opened by a guard in silver armor who interrupts their conversation. The guard asks aloud if anyone wearing shining black armor recently passed through that inn. Kai and the inn owner look at each other immediately, startled by the soldier's presence and the direct question. Desperate, the protagonist joins his hands and begs silently for the local owner to hide him from the ducal soldier. The owner of the place is in shock and whispers, saying that the guard is actually one of the men who served directly under the duke. The silver guard insists on the question, wanting to know if anyone in dark clothing was there recently. Kai continues begging quietly and says that he will take all the blame if they are discovered by the Imperial Guard. The merchant lies to the guard, saying that, unfortunately, no one fitting that description passed through his inn. The guard finally leaves, closing the door and leaving a tense silence in the inn's hall for a few moments. The owner of the establishment begins to complain to the youth, but is interrupted again by a new unexpected visit. A very beautiful nun enters the place and asks exactly the same question about the dark, armored warrior. The merchant recognizes the sacred church's vestments, and Kai repeats his desperate request to be hidden there. Under pressure, the inn owner lies once more, telling the nun he didn't see anyone fitting that description. The woman thanks him politely and leaves the establishment while the merchant tries to catch his breath. Suddenly, another guardian opens the door violently, asking again for the mysterious young man in black armor. While Kai hides under the counter, the owner of the place goes into total despair with so many surprise visits. The man forces a very strained smile and repeats the same lie as before, saying he didn't see any such warrior. The guardian thanks him for the information and leaves, wondering where on earth that mysterious young man could have gone. As soon as the door closes, the inn owner turns, trembling with anger and fear toward the protagonist. Kai is completely speechless and starts to tremble with terror upon realizing the gravity of that whole situation. The merchant screams, asking what he did to have the town's three greatest forces hunting for him at the same time. The youth confesses that even he himself doesn't know, and that perhaps he did something very absurd without even realizing it. The man slams the counter, annoyed, saying he cannot ignore this, and that he must resolve this mess immediately. Totally lost, the protagonist asks himself in despair what he should do to escape this big problem. In another place, a young woman with red hair examines Karen's leg to ensure she is totally recovered. Karen repeats patiently that she is feeling very well, and that her leg does not show any kind of pain or aftermath. With a beautiful smile on her face, the young redhead thanks the constant care and concern of her sister immensely. The sister says she is happy about the healing, but confesses to missing the routine of daily care they used to have. Suddenly, the sister changes the subject with a thoughtful expression on her face while looking at the redhead with curiosity. She thinks it's strange that they haven't found the young man yet, given that he carries a child and draws much attention wherever he passes. Karen deduces that the hero is deliberately hiding to avoid them discovering his exact location in the town. The sister agrees with the reasoning, reveals that their father also told the whole truth about the agent's situation. Karen worries, wondering if the hero is being punished by the Empire for having used such a valuable elixir to save them. She gets annoyed, remembering how the youth lied, pretending to be rustic just so they would accept the elixir without worries. The sister ponders that the youth did this to protect his secret and hide that he actually belongs to the elite Vertar force. The redhead sighs deeply, hoping with all her heart that the youth does not suffer any severe punishment from his superiors. The sister smiles mischievously, saying it is rare to see Karen so discouraged and worried about an unknown young man. She jokes, winking at her sister, and says that at no point did she say that finding the savior interesting was something bad. Karen pouts and gets quite grumpy with the persistent teasing from her older sister. The sister comments that other saved young woman also thought the young man was wonderful for having risked his life in the rescue. She reveals that Nina and Remy told similar stories and that all of them wish to reunite with him to thank him personally. Karen states with determination that of all of them, she is certainly the one thinking the most about the mysterious hero. The young woman denies being embarrassed, while her sister has a lot of fun with her cute reaction. Back at the inn, the owner tells Kai that he didn't act wrongly, but that hiding will only make his stay difficult. He warns that rumors about the black, armored warrior are spreading very strongly throughout the entire town. Kai listens carefully while realizing that there really is no other suspect who fits that description. Worried, the youth asks the merchant what level of punishment he might receive if the rumors are real. The man explains that at best Kai might be banned forever from setting foot in that big town. The merchant says that hiding him is tense and gives him an important piece of advice, not to change inns by any means. He reveals that a huge reward of 3 million coins was offered to anyone who reveals the hero's whereabouts. Kai slams the table, shocked by the absurd amount, and asks why the merchant didn't turn him in to get rich. The man says it would be too late for that and deduces that the youth must be some very influential and powerful figure. The protagonist tries to deny it desperately, but the merchant just laughs, thinking it is just a humble disguise. Kai accepts that he won't convince him and decides he should take advantage of the day to relax a little before something happens. The owner of the place wishes him a good time, and the youth leaves to explore the beautiful town of Aldea without his heavy armor. He arrives in front of an imposing stone building and thinks he needs to enjoy the place in case he is kicked out tomorrow. Walking through the streets, the youth eats some delicious snacks and feels very happy for this moment of peace. Suddenly, the loud sound of the bells from the old clock tower begins to echo, calling the protagonist's attention. Upon looking at the beautiful tower, he remembers having climbed the place in the game and decides to go up there one last time. The youth complains mentally upon realizing that the fee charged to enter the tower continues to be extremely high. Even finding the price steep, he decides to pay and starts climbing the stone stairs without caring about the expenses. He finally reaches the top of the place and closes his eyes to feel the gentle breeze of the late afternoon on his face. Upon opening his eyes, the youth suddenly encounters a totally unexpected presence right before him. A mysterious and elegant woman with red hair and a long black dress is standing there, observing the beautiful landscape. She turns slowly toward the youth, displaying a very beautiful dark mask over her delicate face. Kai is totally fascinated and without reaction upon contemplating the mysterious beauty of that unknown woman. A little embarrassed, the youth tries to break the ice by greeting the masked lady quite shyly. With much elegance and a beautiful smile, she responds to Kai's greeting, wishing him an excellent sunny day. The youth remembers a rumor from the game about a mysterious character who appeared in the tower and decides to stay alert. The two remain side by side on the parapet in a comfortable silence, while enjoying the beautiful view of the town. The masked woman breaks the silence, commenting that that high place is wonderful for clearing one's thoughts. The protagonist agrees softly, keeping his gaze fixed on the beautiful landscape of Aldia's houses under the setting sun. Kai gathers courage and asks politely for the reason a woman like her came to such an isolated place. She smiles and responds sympathetically that she came for the same reason of clearing the ideas of her tired mind. Then she asks, by surprise, if he has heard of the mysterious black, armored warrior. Upon hearing the question, the protagonist swallows hard and starts to break into a cold sweat, trying to disguise his extreme nervousness. He feigns naturalness and responds that that man has certainly been the most talked about subject by everyone lately. The masked lady reveals that many people are looking for him, and that she herself very much wishes to meet him up close. Feigning innocence, the youth questions if the mysterious black, armored hero committed any terrible crime. She denies it immediately with firmness and guarantees that the searches have no relation to any criminal act of his. The youth then questions the real motive for so many important people hunting his whereabouts so intensely. With a mysterious tone, she apologizes and explains that this specific information is a confidential secret. Kai accepts the answer and feels a giant relief in his heart upon discovering that he is not at risk of being arrested by them. The beautiful woman spots a luxurious carriage arriving at the tower entrance and warns that her personal escort has just arrived. Seeing that she is already preparing to leave, the youth hurries to say something before it is too late. He displays a friendly smile and wishes from his heart that the problems afflicting her mind be resolved as soon as possible. The woman is quite surprised by his kindness, and her smile becomes even more radiant through the mask. She makes an elegant farewell bow, thanking him sincerely for the pleasant company and the youth's concern. Kai watches the masked lady descend the tower stairs toward the luxurious carriage that was awaiting her. The youth is quite thoughtful and wonders who that mysterious and fascinating woman could really be. Already at night, the masked lady meets Karen waiting for her beside her carriage under the moonlight. Karen responds happily that going out disguised in that way is the best chance to find their savior. The sister jokes, saying she feels like just a pretext for Karen to go in search of the mysterious hero. Laughing at the situation, the young woman apologizes for the mockery while she settles comfortably inside the vehicle. She confesses that even knowing that, she felt immensely happy for Karen having gone to get her on that cold night. The sister decides to tell about the youth she met by chance at the top of the clock tower just a few minutes ago. Karen finds the story quite suspicious and speculates if he wouldn't be some meddler investigating them. The sister guarantees that she was also on alert at the beginning but soon noticed that the youth had no bad intentions. She smiles, remembering how the youth spoke to her in a humble and sincere way, making the moment special. She says that she asked about the black, armored warrior, but unfortunately did not manage to get any information. Karen comments that their father believes that the hero may have already left the town quite silently. Suddenly, the sister remembers that the youth from the towers said something very intriguing that seemed to carry a real meaning. Curious about the sister's reaction, Karen asks about the physical appearance of that mysterious tourist in the tower. Upon hearing the description of a calm man with a scar on his left eye, Karen widens her eyes completely in shock. The sister confirms that the scar was exactly on the left side, making the puzzle piece finally fit. Karen goes into complete despair and turns quickly toward the window to shout orders to the coachman. She tells the coachman to turn around immediately and return to the tower with the greatest possible speed. Quite startled by the redhead's violent reaction, the sister asks if she has absolute certainty of her suspicion. Karen explains that the hero has the same scar and complains angrily for not having received that crucial detail before. She reveals that keeping his appearance a secret was crucial not to make their own savior's life difficult. The sister swallows hard and stays silent, feeling a pang of guilt for not having noticed the obvious truth sooner. The luxury carriage stops abruptly with a loud creak as soon as it returns to the entrance of the great tower. Karen throws the wooden door open and leaves the vehicle in a hurry without caring about etiquette or danger. The young redhead runs off in the direction of the tower entrance, while her sister tries to keep up close behind. The two climb the infinite stone steps out of breath, anxious to find the mysterious young man again. Upon reaching the top, they find the overlook completely empty, and Karen realizes sadly that he has already gone. The next day, the focus shifts to the busy treasure hunter guild headquarters in the town of Aldea. The guild master hits his head, annoyed for not finding absolutely any information about the rookie. He analyzes a report from 3 days ago about the emergence of a powerful warrior in black clothing. The document details how the warrior saved the heirs of the Empire's 3 most influential families alone. The master ponders that an attack on that region is an insult to the Empire, which justifies sending the Vertar elite. He observes the paperwork scattered on the table and becomes increasingly convinced that that theory is the only possible one. In a harsh manner, he severely orders his men that no one should try to make contact with the Black Warrior. He reminds them that he warned everyone to keep their distance even if they saw him walking through town with a child. The master remembers the reports about the metal giant holding the little blonde girl very docilely in his arms. He thinks about how the little girl's mother apologized for the inconvenience without knowing she was in front of a living legend. The guild leader hopes desperately that the hero finishes his mission soon and decides to return to the capital. Suddenly, a redhead employee opens the door forcefully, shouting that they have a huge problem on their hands. She reveals, desperate, that the feared black armored warrior has just entered the guild's main lobby. The master makes an expression of extreme defeat and begs mentally for a little peace in his chaotic routine. The great hall's double wooden doors are opened slowly, revealing an imposing and heavy silhouette. Wearing his fearsome dark armor, Kai enters the place, calling for everyone's attention and absolute silence there. The silent warrior walks with heavy steps and positions himself imposingly right in front of the service counter. The master forces an extremely docile and polite tone, which makes the people around whisper and laugh at the scene. The local adventurers find it hilarious to see the tough boss act in such a tame and submissive way near the warrior. Garag is furious with the subordinates, but soon turns back to Kai, maintaining his respectful posture. The master tries to start a conversation, asking in a friendly way what brings such an important figure to his guild. The armored protagonist just listens carefully, maintaining his mysterious and intimidating aura in the room. Garag smiles in a friendly way, but on the inside is trembling with fear of that great warrior's intimidating presence. The protagonist, without understanding all that fawning, wonders if he said anything wrong to leave him so nervous. The guild boss hurries to deny it, waving his hands desperately so as not to irritate the hero in any way. The master thinks the excuse of taking a look is actually a secret reconnaissance mission by the Vertar force. He deduces that the youth acts with such tranquility because he knows everyone there has already discovered his true identity. Garag is quite impressed by the warrior's confident posture and recognizes that he is on another level. He remembers his old dream of joining the Imperial elite and how he was never recruited, even being famous. But upon seeing the true elite hero before him, he understands the level difference and considers him a monster. Knowing his limitations, he invites the warrior to go to his private room to talk more calmly. The protagonist accepts the invitation politely, to the relief of the master, who clears the way toward his office. The two walk under the watchful eyes of the receptionists and other bounty hunters in the Great Hall. The local adventurers observe the scene, intrigued, commenting among themselves about the docile attitude of their tough master. They continue speculating the motive for all that fawning while they drink and talk around the wooden table. One of our friends asks in a tone of concern what the companions think of that whole unusual situation. The other treasure hunter comments that the black warrior's posture seemed like an open invitation to start a fight. The girl in the group trembles with terror, imagining the terrible damage that warrior could cause if he lost control. The red, armored youth agrees with the girl, admitting that none of them would have the slightest chance of defeating the hero. The green-haired youth wonders curiously who would win in a direct combat between the hero and an S-level monster. Without his knowing it, the people of the town are turning his warrior reputation into something increasingly absurd. Behind the helmet, the protagonist is just a normal youth who only wishes to live in a calm and quiet way. Sometime later, the master says goodbye to the youth outside the guild, wishing that he returns very soon. Kai walks away startled, thinking the guild is a scary place and swears to himself he will never set foot in that place again. He remembers he only wanted the escort to find him discreetly, so that they could pay his fair reward. However, he doesn't understand why everyone in the guild was staring at him with such cold and murderous looks the whole time. He thinks it's strange, because in the original game, the guild master had an aggressive personality and was quite rude to everyone. The protagonist is also very confused without understanding the reason for having received such special luxury treatment. Despite all the confusion and the scare, he decides to focus on the positive side and tries to forget the guild's problems. He walks slowly through the stone streets of the town while planning calmly his next adventure destination. The youth realizes that it is very difficult to walk unnoticed through Aldea while wearing that flashy armor. Suddenly, the sound of a carriage door opening catches his attention, making him look quickly behind. Karen leaves the vehicle forcefully, shouting, relieved that she finally managed to find him after so much time searching. He is startled to see the crest on the luxury carriage and remembers that Karen belongs to an important dynasty of dukes. The young redhead complains aloud, asking where he was hiding while she searched for him throughout the region. The protagonist tries to apologize, raising his hands, and says simply that he was just resting at the inn. Karen is quite annoyed, saying that she didn't receive any information about his lodging in the official report. Kai explains that he asked the inn owner to hide his presence, and Karen is indignant at that revelation. The redhead faces the hero with a quite distrustful look, which leaves the armored youth visibly embarrassed. She grumbles, saying that, being an elite warrior, he would certainly have had ease in devising that plan. However, she soon gives up on the subject, knowing that the youth would hardly reveal his secret agent secrets. Suddenly, Karen's sister gets out of the carriage, asking what is happening, leaving the warrior surprised. Upon hearing the voice and noticing the unique color of that hair, the protagonist immediately recognizes her from his recent meeting. With much delicacy, the young woman apologizes for the delay in introducing herself formally and says she is called the Noble Leafia. She smiles in a docile way, confessing that simple words of thanks are not enough for them having been saved. Without beating around the bush, the young woman with red hair asks if the dark, armored youth has any free time that afternoon. Kai is quite apprehensive and asks cautiously what would happen if he confirmed that he is free. They invite the youth to go directly to the mansion and, in a comical way, he responds quickly that he is very busy now. The warrior's immediate and sincere refusal leaves Karen outraged, while her sister observes the scene quite surprised. The protagonist trembles inside, fearing being severely punished or executed for acting with such rudeness with nobles. The two sisters look at each other with mischievous and malicious smiles on their faces, planning not to let him escape from there so soon. Ignoring Kai's excuse totally, they hold the warrior's arm and begin to drag him by force toward the vehicle. Karen holds Shikoku's arm with a gentle smile and says that they need to at least thank him. Karen's sister approaches affectionately, warning that they even prepared a comfortable carriage for him. The youth is completely desperate in his mind and tries in vain to ask them to wait a moment. The two sisters display victorious smiles while they continue ignoring the youth's protests totally. Already inside the transport, the warrior laments in thought, feeling that he is being taken into custody by them. Leafia thanks him for the chance to reciprocate the help, since the successful rescue saved her family's prestige. The protagonist agrees in silence, even admitting in thought that he doesn't understand those rules of nobility very well. Karen assumes a quite serious posture and takes advantage of the opportunity to ask a direct question to the youth. He says he thinks it is very strange and scary to see an agitated girl like Karen acting so formally. Annoyed by the warrior's comment, the young noblewoman decides to abandon etiquette and return to her common manner. The youth asks her to continue acting like that and asks what she really wanted to know about the situation. Karen goes straight to the point and asks about the huge quantity of legendary potions he used to heal them. She shows she is quite worried and asks if he ended up getting into trouble with the Empire because of this. The warrior is surprised by her concern and guarantees that the potions were his and didn't generate problems. Upon hearing this unexpected answer, the two sisters are left completely in shock and without reaction on the seat. Karen insists, asking if he really is okay and if there is nothing their influential family can do. Lifia also intervenes, asking for him to at least explain in which circumstances all this happened. The protagonist feels totally lost in the conversation without understanding the reason for so much drama on their part. The youth tries to think of a quick way to convince them that there is absolutely nothing wrong happening. He says he doesn't regret anything and that seeing Karen's leg healed is the only thing that really matters. The youth states that he will take care of his own problems while the girls stare at him with bright and touched looks. The two noblewomen are left in complete silence and quite flushed before so much generosity coming from the hero. The sister thanks Shikoku immensely while he realizes that they created a heroic story in their minds. The warrior decides to take advantage of the favorable moment to ask a small favor of the two noble sisters of the town. Lifia and Karen show they are ready to help and ask with curiosity what kind of favor that would be. The protagonist says the request has a relation to the moment he is going to meet the Duke at the mansion. He asks them to interfere if he ends up being rude to their father in exchange for not charging for the potions. The unusual proposal of refusing a large fortune leaves the two sisters completely shocked and speechless. Karen exclaims, incredulous, asking if he is really serious about letting go of that absurd amount. The youth responds with seriousness that he is just an ordinary person and that political influence is what he fears the most. The youth reinforces in his mind that there is absolutely nothing more important than guaranteeing his own life. The sisters look at each other in silence, trying to process the humble and unusual explanation given by the hero. Lifia thinks that his attempt to hide his true status of nobility or agent was a bit clumsy. Karen also suspects the obvious way he tried to divert the subject about his real identity as a warrior. Without noticing their suspicion, the warrior just says he understands the situation and feels calmer. Karen guarantees the youth that their father would never get irritated with him regardless of how rude he was. The older sister also agrees with the proposal and says the agreement will help quite a bit to keep him safe. She then asks if he intends to continue wearing that heavy metal armor the whole time. The youth agrees, saying that it really would be a tremendous lack of education not to remove the helmet at the mansion. Karen says she only thought of his comfort, while Lefia confesses she would love to see the hero's true face. The young redhead gets quite embarrassed by her sister's comment and complains, saying that was impolite. The protagonist is quite surprised by the two sisters' sudden interest in seeing his true appearance. Lifia just smiles in a mysterious and docile way, placing her index finger over her delicate lips. She admires the youth's sincerity, who doesn't demonstrate arrogance or try to take advantage of their nobility. The young woman thinks that the youth maintains the armor just to continue focused on protecting them from any danger. She perfectly understands the reason her youngest sister became so fond of such an unusual hunter. She reflects on how most treasure hunters usually change their attitude as they gain fame. Many of them end up awakening the envy of other competitors the moment they reach the peak of success. As a direct consequence, the vast majority start to show off their wealth and prestige in a quite arrogant way. However, the young hero continues extremely humble, even possessing a power that surpasses any other. Lifia feels so grateful to the hero that she wonders how much he must be loved and respected by everyone around him. The warrior confesses he is getting nervous, and Karen jokes, saying a giant in armor like that looks very awkward. Shikoku pretends to get offended and retorts, saying it's a pity she was saved by a warrior so awkward like that. Karen screams quite annoyed and denies that she is ungrateful in any way after everything he did for their group. Lifia finds it funny to see a member of the Empire's feared elite force admit shyness near a local duke. She deduces that the hero acts in a simple way, just to deal with her youngest sister's agitated temperament. As daughters of an influential duke, they are accustomed to dealing constantly with other members of the high nobility. Most young nobles in the town approach the sisters only for political interests or arranged marriages. She deals politely with the suitors, but in truth has no real interest in those formal meetings. Furthermore, people at court used to treat Karen with much indifference because of her former injured leg. The other petty nobles never had time to demonstrate empathy with young Karen's difficult physical situation. Seeing Shikoku joke and give sincere attention to Karen fills Lifia's heart with immense relief and pure happiness. She remembers with affection when Karen ran into the room, very excited to go meet the warrior. The young woman realizes that he accepted getting into the carriage with them just to preserve the good reputation of her father. The warrior refused an immense reward for the elixir that totally healed the debilitated legs of little Karen. He let go of a potion so valuable, capable of buying an entire kingdom, just in exchange for help with the Duke. She questions if there really exists in the world any other person with a personality so worthy and generous like that. With her heart beating stronger, the young noblewoman wishes to find a way to continue by the mysterious hero's side. She breaks the silence and asks in a docile way how long he plans to remain in the great town of Aldea. Lifia offers immediate help to arrange a luxury residence in case he has interest in moving for good. He says that the town is very pleasant, but comments that his stay there will depend purely on his own mood. The young noblewoman soon deduces that the warrior used this excuse to hide that he follows strict orders from his superiors. She knows that his secret missions save countless lives in the kingdom without people ever knowing about it. Upon thinking of Karen's rescue, she wonders in thought if insisting on maintaining contact with him would be her selfishness. She focuses her determined gaze in the direction of the armored hero while she makes a big decision in her heart. Shikoku, on the other hand, continues oblivious to her romantic thoughts and focuses only on how to act before the Duke. The carriage finally crosses the great iron gates and arrives before the monumental mansion of the ducal family. A guard approaches with speed and opens the door of the luxurious wooden vehicle so that everyone can get out. As they get out, all the mansion's employees and the imperial guards bow deeply in respect to the visitors. The protagonist is completely shocked and speechless upon seeing that grand gala reception in the courtyard. With a beautiful smile, Lifia explains in a docile way that all that ceremony is a humble demonstration of respect. The youth tries to refuse, arguing awkwardly that there's not the slightest need to organize something so exaggerated. He fears that so much attention causes problems, but the girl guarantees that the reception was decided by everyone at the mansion. She warns in an intimidating way that anyone who disrespected the savior would be punished with extreme severity. The cold declaration of the young noblewoman leaves the protagonist dying of fear and completely without reaction under the helmet. He helps Karen get out while trembling with terror, thinking about what kind of terrible punishments they would be capable of. He tries to maintain composure before the guards even though he is extremely nervous with all that pomp. The headmaid and the guard captain bow before Shikoku, thanking him sincerely for his illustrious visit. The governess warns that the dukes are already awaiting him in another meeting room and volunteers to guide the hero. Karen wishes the youth a good conversation, while the two noblewomen prepare to follow a different path. Lifia whispers that she will be waiting in the room next door in case he needs help dealing with the Duke's temperament. She guarantees that she will act immediately to defend him from any uncomfortable situation with the Duke at the location. The warrior laments that they cannot enter with him and turns with much apprehension in the direction of the captain. The guard captain is startled by Shikoku's sudden voice and responds readily. In a polite way, the hero hands over his valuable black sword, asking the guard to keep it during the meeting. The officer widens his eyes, completely stunned, and stammers, asking if the hero is sure of his gesture. Kai explains that such an important place should not allow weapons and that the guards only fulfill their duty. To calm the guard, he jokes, saying that in truth he is much stronger fighting empty-handed in battle. Upon hearing that scary affirmation, the noble sisters and the governess stare at the youth with absolute astonishment. The captain accepts the legendary black sword, feeling extremely honored for receiving such a demonstration of trust. The protagonist agrees, nodding his head, and thinks that in truth that is no joke at all. He remembers that after reincarnating he tried to use weapons, but noticed he couldn't move with total precision. Because he was easily defeated before managing to strike, the youth prefers to focus only on hand-to-hand combat. On account of this, handing over his high-level black sword doesn't represent any kind of real problem for him. The warrior realizes that there's no more fleeing and admits that facing a noble with real power is quite scary. The governess asks the youth to follow her and begins to guide him in a polite way through the long hallways of the mansion. He breathes deeply, trying to maintain the imposing and firm posture while he advances in the direction of the Duke's great room. The youth walks under the watchful eyes of the servants and hopes in thought that the meeting ends in peace. The black sword that he handed over at the entrance is actually a legendary work of art known as Dillahan. That magic weapon never breaks, but possesses the peculiar characteristic of having its luck attribute variable. The hero warns that if Karen has curiosity, she will be able to hold the sword later under the captain's supervision. The two noblemen observe the warrior moving away, while the guard captain holds the legendary black sword. The door of the room closes in a silent way and leaves the two sisters alone at the entrance of the mansion's courtyard. Lifia stays in silence for an instant, but soon notices that Karen ran out agitatedly in the direction of the guard. With her eyes shining with excitement, the little redhead runs to the guard captain, who is startled by her hurry. The girl demands to see the magic sword immediately, saying she was anxious to contemplate the beautiful black blade. The officer laughs awkwardly at the girl's excitement, while Lifia lets out a light sigh due to the lack of etiquette. The blade, in fact, resembles a shining jewel, and the captain thinks it seems to be a little too fragile. Karen approaches, fascinated by the gleaming shine of the metal, while the captain raises the artifact with much care. The two try to deduce the warrior's fighting style and think he must be an agile and quite technical warrior. The officer instructs Karen to hold the heavy weapon, firmly using both hands, and the young redhead obeys nervously. The captain asks if she is ready and warns he will release the metal handle so she feels the entire weight. In the instant the guard releases the sword, Karen makes an expression of extreme surprise and total astonishment. The youth and Lifia react, startled, upon noticing that the colossal weight of the sword pushes Karen's arm down. The young redhead loses her total balance under the weight of the metal and lets out a startled scream while she falls to the floor. The tip of the sword falls heavily and pierces the solid stone slabs of the courtyard as if they were made of paper. The group stays in complete silence, contemplating the legendary black sword stuck deeply into the pure stone floor. Cracks begin to spread around the slit, showing that the floor was destroyed without the slightest effort there. Shocked, the three realize the extreme danger, and Karen begs desperately for the guard to recover the magic weapon. The captain notices that the sword cut the stone without force and concludes that no common armor would resist that power. The guard remembers that the hero says he fights better without weapons and concludes, startled, that he must be an elite monster. He helps the young redhead get up and asks, worried, if she suffered any serious injury in the fall. Lifia forces a friendly smile and promises the guard that she and her sister will explain the entire damage to the Duke. Meanwhile, a hot cup of tea is served elegantly on the wooden table in the mansion's visitor room. Seated on the comfortable library sofa, the two sisters appear to be quite discouraged and thoughtful. They hear the voices of their parents thanking the armored hero's illustrious visit politely in the next room. Karen looks sadly toward her older sister and murmurs quietly that she already imagined how things would be. Lifia agrees with sadness and notices the reason they weren't left to participate in that formal conversation. Paying much attention to the muffled sound, the young noblewoman tries to capture the details of the important dialogue next door. She knows her father always acts with extreme imposingness at court to avoid anyone trying to take advantage of him. On account of this, noticing such deference on the part of the patriarch leaves her slightly uncomfortable and surprised. Karen confesses she feels terrible upon seeing the noble parents bowing so much before that unknown warrior. Lifia observes the evident discouragement of her youngest sister, and besides, she needs to act to clear her thoughts. With a subtle smile on her face, the older sister questions if she really has time to stay discouraged like that. The unexpected question from her sister leaves the young redhead quite confused and without understanding the real reason for the teasing. Lifia points out that Karen just destroyed the courtyard's valuable stone slabs upon dropping the colossal sword. She warns that the little redhead will have to give a good explanation for the damage caused with the legendary magic weapon. Desperate and crying in a comical way, Karen laments, saying she only manages to arrange problems for everyone there. The little redhead tries to defend herself, arguing, desperate, that she didn't put any real force in the weapon's handling. She screams, indignant, questioning where that absurd and destructive cutting power of the legendary black sword comes from. Lifia lets out a long and tired sigh, showing that the agitation of her youngest sister has already left her exhausted. She advises the little redhead to focus on being a good daughter from now on to compensate for all that confusion. Karen remembers the hero's sincere advice, saying for her to enjoy life and do everything she couldn't before. Lifia smiles affectionately, approaching her face to Karen's, who reacts with much surprise to the gesture. The older sister winks happily, remembering that the youngest doesn't have any time to stay discouraged or sad. Karen smiles back, demonstrating that she perfectly understood the loving and encouraging message from her sister. She records how the Black Warrior tried at all costs to hide the value of the elixir so as not to leave them guilty. Lifia highlights that he used the potion aware that even the Emperor could be furious with such waste. On account of this, the two agree that they need to reciprocate this immense favor in any way possible. Karen still questions herself, confused about the motive for someone so powerful and important to refuse any kind of reward. The older sister finds it funny and argues that this disinterest in material goods just proves he is special. A reward offered by a duke includes land and gold enough for anyone to live in absolute luxury. Besides marriages with influential nobles, almost any realistic desire could be easily granted to him there. Even so, Lifia confesses with a smile that her greatest desire is to manage to see the true face of the youth. She gets quite embarrassed upon thinking of being the only person chosen by him to contemplate his appearance. Karen jokes, saying her sister is in love, and Lifia denies it, desperate, while she becomes completely red. The little redhead says she can reveal details of his face, in case her sister confesses her true feelings for him. Immediately, the two sisters begin to stare at each other in an extremely tense and competitive way on the library sofa. Sparks seem to arise between the looks of the two young women, showing that neither of them intends to yield in that dispute. A quite comical and embarrassing silence takes over the environment while they continue without saying a single word. Lifia turns her face grumpy, guaranteeing that she is just curious about his mysterious and humble personality. Karen smiles victoriously, saying that this is one more reason for her to avoid her sister getting near the handsome warrior. Irritated with the persistent teasing of her youngest sister, the young heiress complains in a cute way, shaking her fists. While the two sisters continue arguing in the room, Shikoku's official meeting with the dukes finally begins. The duke and his wife are sweating cold from nervousness, without understanding the reason for the whole situation being so serious there. The noble just observes silently while the feared hero in black armor demonstrates a firm posture before them. The duke clenches his own hands, tense, asking himself the reason for a commander so strong acting with so much courtesy. He finds it unbelievable that the youth bows humbly to preserve the dignity and honor of their noble family. The The patriarch realizes that the hero doesn't demonstrate any interest in taking political or financial advantage of the situation. He knows that the youth is in a position of advantage, so great that he could demand any valuable good from the duchy. The two recognize that they wouldn't have how to refuse any request made by a hero of the imposing Vertar Guild. Being an agent connected directly to the Emperor, the youth possesses influence much greater than theirs there. A common hunter would accept the reward immediately, but Shikoku's intentions continue impossible to read. The Duke ponders that accepting the payment in secret would be the most discreet way to hide his true identity. The nobles look at each other quite worried, raising the terrible hypothesis of being tested by the youth. Despite not managing to read the expressions behind the helmet, the Duke confesses that he sympathized much with the hero. At the same time, he considers the warrior a figure extremely mysterious and difficult to decipher in the dialogue. The noble feels that the hero's silence is in truth a silent charge on how the ducal house will deal with him. He swallows hard, maintaining his focused gaze, and tries to formulate a response up to the dignity of that warrior. The hero's presence in dark emanates energy, so imposing that it fills the entire great hall totally. Duke knows that if he lets him leave without any fair reward, this would stain his family's honor in the kingdom. He understands that the hero refused the easy gold to test the sincerity and true character of his family. The father admits with shame that the youth gave them much more than just healing by returning the joy of his daughter. He pushes away the silly worries and says he is immensely grateful for the valuable opportunity of meeting the youth personally. The Duke assumes the word and explains awkwardly that the honor of his duchy demands that they offer a worthy retribution. Shikoku is a bit surprised but agrees to accept provided that it is a reasonable request and without exaggerations on their part. The Duchess opens a beautiful and relieved smile, guaranteeing that fulfilling that agreement is the greatest honor for her family. The Duke closes his eyes, letting out a sigh of extreme relief upon realizing that the agreement was finally sealed there. He raises 3 fingers of his left hand, announcing with pride the 3 great rewards prepared for the warrior. Upon hearing about the luxury mansion and the huge quantity of gold, the youth in dark armor is left completely without reaction. The Duchess bows slightly and begs for the armored warrior to accept the rewards offered by them. The Duke thinks to himself that giving the mansion as a secret base of operations for the Verdar elite was the right decision. He believes that this is the best opportunity to create bonds with someone under the direct command of the Emperor himself. Faced with so much insistence, the dark, armored warrior finally yields and accepts the gifts offered by the family. The Duke feels immensely relieved upon realizing that he managed to give the correct response to please the mysterious warrior. The noble suggests that his daughters show personally the location and the interior of the new mansion that same day. The warrior thanks him, saying that this would help quite a bit, and the Duke immediately entrusts the task to his daughters. The Duke then asks his wife to guide the hero to the room next door, where the 2 daughters were already awaiting him anxiously. The Duchess stands up elegantly and asks Jet Black to accompany her to the room where the young women are gathered. The Duke stays alone in the meeting room, extremely satisfied for having managed to resolve that complicated situation. As soon as the door closes, silence returns to the great hall while the noble tries to finally relax a little. The Duke looks at his own hands and notices that they are still trembling quite a bit from pure nervousness after the meeting. The noble puts his hand on his head, trying to calm down while noticing the frightening and imposing presence of that warrior. The Duke recognizes in thought that his daughter Karen was truly saved by a man incredibly powerful and rare. Already in the room next door, the warrior sighs, exhausted, behind the helmet, thinking about how that conversation was tense and difficult. One of the girls stares at him quite distrustfully, commenting that he doesn't look like a legendary elite hero at all. The protagonist points to his own heavy armor, arguing that his imposing visual is owed purely to the vestments. The older sister smiles in a docile way and asks with much elegance for the armored warrior to feel at his home. She then suggests quite directly that he could at least pretend a little better instead of being so honest and humble. The young redhead says it is impossible that someone doesn't demonstrate immense joy upon receiving a huge reward from her father. The warrior is quite confused by their doubts and guarantees that in truth he is extremely happy with the gifts. He explains in secret that receiving a reward so grand and valuable like that is, in truth, quite a scary thing. The youth confesses that if he were alone in the room, he would certainly be celebrating much and jumping for joy with the gold. Llegendary stares at the youth with a serious look and says, quite cautiously, that she would like to ask one more question to the hero. The young noblewoman questions if that mansion and the gold are really enough, or if he would like to demand anything more there. Kai thinks to himself that he doesn't care for political support since he won a huge mansion and a big mountain of coins. He feigns a quick cough and says quite firmly that the reward decisions are subjects that only adults resolve. The warrior asks if they agree with the gift, since that mansion could have some sentimental value for them. The girls laugh and explain quite calmly that their influential family possesses several luxury mansions scattered out there. Karen warns that living alone in a mansion of luxury so gigantic can be quite scary and very difficult to take care of. Llegendary says that the property's garden is smaller, but guarantees that the structure built is almost the same size as the main one. The armored youth is startled upon noticing that the mansion given to him wasn't designed for just one single person to live in. He trembles with terror behind the mask upon noticing in a comical way how the wealth of that enters nobles is scary. Llegendary raises her hand in a polite way and asks if the warrior plans to shelter other people or create a secret base there. The protagonist agrees in a joking tone, saying he intends to live alone there for now as if it were his base. The young woman asks in a cheeky way if he doesn't intend to take some girlfriend, since a famous hunter wouldn't be single. Llegendary asks curious if the hero doesn't possess any real interest in romance, and the dark, armored youth denies it, startled. The two sisters begin to whisper among themselves, joking that the hero must think he is too good for any suitor of the kingdom. The hero suggests in a friendly way that the two sisters visit him whenever they wish to help him deal with the huge mansion. The sudden proposal leaves the two young women extremely animated and with very bright looks of pure happiness. The warrior says he is speaking seriously and decides to hand over a spare key so that they enter even when he is out. The protagonist thinks that a property so immense will still guarantee privacy, even if the two decide to visit him always. Karen celebrates, saying she will visit him often while her older sister also promises to attend the location. The warrior agrees, and the girls decide immediately that they must leave together to see his new luxury mansion. A little time later, the group finally arrives before the beautiful mansion, bathed by the sun and surrounded by crystal clear water. Upon entering, they come across a living room extremely luxurious and decorated with the most expensive and elegant furniture there. The mansion's kitchen also surprises by the giant size and for possessing marble counters and cabinets of noble wood. The great dining hall counts on an immense wooden polished table and a beautiful golden chandelier shining in the high ceiling. Llegendary explains with sympathy that all the luxury furniture and decorations are gifts from her family to furnish the property. The hero stays stopped at the door entrance, wondering if it was really correct to accept as a gift a place so luxurious like that. Karen finds the humble way of jet black quite strange, but warns that accepting the mansion is a totally different subject. The armored warrior walks through the mansion's immense hall, contemplating the beautiful chandeliers and the gigantic shelves. Jet Black asks politely for the two sisters to sit because he wishes for them to feel totally at home there. The hero lets out a long sigh upon sitting on the sofa while Karen asks if he spoke that out of concern for her. The little redhead pouts with crossed arms and guarantees, in a quite stubborn way, that she is not feeling any fatigue. The warrior says children shouldn't push themselves themselves too much, and Karen gets furious, responding that she is already a young adult. The youth explains calmly that he didn't spend that valuable potion on her just to see her wear herself out again for nothing. He trembles upon thinking of the terrible rumor that would arise if he let the dear daughter of a powerful duke get too tired. Lifeia observes the warrior's affection for her youngest sister and opens a beautiful smile, appreciating his sincere kindness. The hero jokes, saying that if she refuses to use the soft sofa, she can sit on the top of his heavy metal armor. In thought, he celebrates, thinking he gave an infallible answer to convince the stubborn little girl to go to the sofa. Karen surprises the hero by agreeing to sit, and he responds in a distracted way without paying much attention to the speech. The youth widens his eyes, completely shocked, upon noticing the true meaning of Karen's unexpected answer. Without hesitating, the little redhead settles comfortably on the armored warrior's lap, leaving him completely paralyzed. The youth stammers, saying it was just a joke, and asks if she doesn't find sitting on hard metal very uncomfortable. The young woman agrees her bottom will hurt, but continues there while he insists for her to go to the comfortable sofa. The warrior notices that her older sister suddenly became an absolute silence with a quite somber aura in the background. Lifia comments in a cold way about the luck of Karen, and the little redhead feigns indifference, saying she isn't happy with that. With a quite forced smile, the older sister retorts immediately, leaving the little redhead irritated with the teasing. Karen asks the youth the reason for still using the heavy armor, being that mansion now belongs totally to him. The youth diverts the subject in a shy way, alleging he prefers to continue equipped just in case some unforeseen event arises. In truth, he fears that Lifia recognizes him as the tourist from the clock tower and decides to change the subject to avoid this. The protagonist analyzes the situation with much caution through the slit of his dark helmet, trying to devise a plan. The youth raises his large metal hand in a calm way and decides to take an attitude to resolve that small dispute. In a subtle way, he begins to give light pats on Karen's head, who widens her eyes, quite surprised by the affection. The little redhead gets extremely red with embarrassment and screams, demanding that he stop treating her like a defenseless little child. She begins to kick in a cute way on the hero's lap, while he insists patiently for her to move to the sofa. The warrior comments he finds it impressive that the Duke entrusted the task of guiding him to his two young daughters. He explains that a noble would normally send a man of trust, since the hero's real identity continues secret. Lifia guarantees that her father would never act without thinking, and says that he certainly judged the warrior worthy of total trust. The youth reflects in silence on the Duke's wisdom, while he continues making affection on Karen's head without noticing. He deduces that the Duke must be very experienced with people while the little redhead tries to push his hand away from her head. Karen looks back and states with affection, it being impossible not to trust him after the youth donated potions, so rare to their group. The Jet Black accepts the argument, but refuses immediately a special invitation made by Lifia to dine at their mansion. The young woman laughs awkwardly at the quick response and comments that the life of an elite warrior must be very busy. Karen demands that he warn them before leaving the town, but the warrior refuses immediately, leaving the little redhead indignant. The youth confesses in his mind that in truth he has much fear of meeting the influential and imposing Duke again. The pink-haired noble agrees with the youth, understanding that the complex secret routine of his Verdar organization must be. Seeing the dissatisfaction of the little redhead, the older sister says that unfortunately, there is nothing to be done about his duties. Karen asks then for him to remain in the town the longest time possible, and the warrior promises to stay for a good period. The hero remembers that other influential people in the town like Nina and Remy are still searching desperately for him. The protagonist is quite tense with this, but is interrupted by Karen, who starts to stare at him quite distrustfully. The older sister begins to mime with her hands, suggesting in a fun way that he should lift his metal visor. Karen shakes her head quite energetically, preventing her sister from continuing with that teasing so bold. The little redhead asks with distrust about the gesture, gesture, and her older sister quickly disguises, saying it was nothing. Karen reveals without mercy that Lifia was trying to make him lift the visor, which leaves the older sister dying of shame. The protagonist is totally without a way behind the helmet upon listening to that compromising revelation about Lifia. Lifia hides her flushed face, while promising mentally that the cheeky Karen will receive a severe punishment later. The older sister orders the little one to leave Jet Black's lap immediately, but the little redhead refuses in a stubborn way. Karen holds firmly the warrior's metal hand, showing she doesn't intend to let him go away so soon from there. Karen provokes her sister, saying she should admit soon if she were jealous. Lifia is completely in shock, while the hero thinks she doesn't seem jealous. The warrior tells Miss Lifia that she really shouldn't do this kind of thing. The two sisters are completely in shock upon hearing his answer, so direct. Karen gets quite annoyed and asks why he rejected her sister but not her. He explains that he doesn't treat her differently, but that she is beautiful and probably already has a partner. The older sister agrees and reveals that she really usually receives many marriage proposals. She compliments with a smile without grace, saying that even so she continues totally single. The protagonist is quite surprised by that revelation unexpected about her being single. Karen explains that men fall in love with her sister and then get too embarrassed to face her. The hero thinks he manages to understand the suitors because it is difficult to act normal near someone so beautiful. She continues, saying her sister wants affection, but men stay away for fear of being embarrassed. Lifia dies of embarrassment and asks her to stop with that while she is still sitting on his lap. The little one whispers to the warrior, asking him to give light pats on the sofa next to her. Without understanding the reason, the hero decides to do what the girl asked, even being quite confused. He gives light knocks on the empty seat and calls the older sister's attention in an immediate way. Lifia stares at the empty space on the sofa, while the two observe her in total expectation. She resolves to sit right next to him, leaving the protagonist even more nervous with the situation. The older sister takes a little peek from the corner of her eye in a way extremely charming. She touches gently on his arm, leaving the warrior without knowing how to react at that moment. Karen is impressed for never having seen her sister act in a way so affectionate before. Outside the mansion, the carriage is ready, and they thank him for the help received that day. Lifia smiles in a way very gentle, and thanks immensely for the precious time they spent together. She warns that the last gift with the family seal should take about 3 days to be delivered. She adds that the two are going to meet personally to discuss the management of the property. The conversation ends and the group prepares to leave after finalizing all the arrangements. Karen says goodbye with a beautiful smile on her face and asks him to take care until the next meeting. The warrior waves back, wishing the same, and asks her to calm the parents upon arriving home. The girl promises she will do that, and the two finally leave, saying goodbye to the hero. The carriage door closes with a loud sound, indicating that their trip is about to begin. The vehicle begins to move away slowly while the warrior continues observing from afar on the road. He says goodbye mentally to them, while he sees them disappearing into the horizon with the start of the trip. Finally alone, the youth begins to take off his heavy armor to manage to breathe better. The youth feels extremely relieved for finally being able to get rid of all that suffocating weight. Inside the carriage, the two sisters talk about how time passed too quickly with him. The little redhead confesses with a sad look that in truth she would like to have stayed even more time. The older sister agrees, and Karen points out that she had luck for being called beautiful by him. Lifia gets quite flushed and remembers that he also called the youngest by the own name of Karen. Karen is thoughtful and comments about how that warrior manages to be someone so calm and accessible. The youngest teases the older one, saying that the real reason for wanting to stay was to see his face. Lifia remembers when the mysterious warrior saved the life of her youngest sister in the past. She also remembers the possibility in being the same youth she met in the clock tower. Faced with those memories, she admits to herself that she really wanted to see the face behind the armor. Karen tries to cheer her sister, promising she will draw the hero's face as soon as they arrive home. The older sister thanks her, but says that her drawing style is too peculiar to serve as reference. The little one complains that the sister draws worse, but soon Lifia notices something strange coming from outside. Lifia finds strange the behavior of her sister and asks what she is observing with so much attention out there. Outside, the protagonist appears without the helmet, enjoying the wind and resting a little. The older sister is totally paralyzed upon seeing his face without the armor for the first time. Karen calls for her sister in an urgent way, trying to show the big discovery she just made. Karen notices the sudden silence of her sister and asks what is happening to her. Outside, the youth continues without the helmet with a calm and thoughtful expression. A discreet smile begins to arise on Lifia's lips upon confirming her suspicions. The older sister comments with good humor that man insisted on provoking her until the end. Karen is surprised and asks if he was really the youth that her sister met in the tower. She confirms with all the certainty of the world while she continues watching the hero moving away on the road. Lifia questions if the meeting in the tower was a coincidence, since no one knew she loved that place. She reflects that if he already knew that, it would make sense for him to have escaped on a busy day to go there. The young woman imagines that he planned everything to verify if Karen's leg was already totally healed. The youngest sister is moved upon noticing that the warrior was thinking about her well-being the whole time. She concludes with a caring smile on her face that he's a person truly kind. She remembers that he used a valuable potion on his own account and probably was punished by his superiors. Even with the consequences, the warrior had said that he didn't regret any of his choices. She notices that he chose gentle words, take the guilt from Karen's heart like someone strong. The young woman supposes that he also stood guard at the tower to guarantee that the kidnappers didn't return. She is thoughtful about his effort, while the youth decides to take a bath upon arriving at his destination. Lifia's heart beats stronger upon noticing that he resolved everything alone without wanting any credit. The image of the youth smiling in a gentle way does not leave the mind of the young woman, who is completely enchanted. She sighs with passion, thinking about how he is a wonderful man worthy of all her admiration. She confesses to her sister that she can hardly wait for the reunion in 3 days to talk more with him. Karen notices the passionate expression of her older sister and begins to tease her in a fun way. The trip continues under the twilight light while Lifia goes over the details of that memorable day. She admits to herself that she wishes to get even closer to him and get to know him much better in the future. Karen stays in silence, observing her sister with an analytical look and quite curious about all that. The older one wonders what their father would say if he discovered about this sudden feeling for him. Karen reflects that for their father, the warrior, is someone extremely important and out of reach. Lifia tries to imagine what would be the exact reaction of her father upon discovering their involvement with the hero. In another place, a redhead man ends up sneezing suddenly, calling the attention of who was by his side. The scene changes to a tavern where someone comments that it will be sad not to see the hero again in that region. The owner of the place cleans a cup and says that he already imagined his departure for he not having returned on the previous night. The youth begins to cut a piece of meat very succulent to enjoy his meal at the tavern. He reassures the owner, saying that even moving away, he still intends to return always to eat at that place. The attendant is happy with the praise, while the youth repeats with a full mouth that the food from there is wonderful. The man thanks from the heart for the affection and guarantees that the doors will always be open to receive him. The owner asks where he plans to live and offers to get cheap accommodations in other inns. The youth eats a piece of meat and responds calmly that in truth he just won a house of his own. The attendant is totally shocked and interrupts the conversation to ask how he managed a house. He explains in a relaxed way that he tried to refuse, but the Duke himself made a point of giving him the residence. The man widens his eyes without managing to believe in a revelation as surreal as that about the Duke. The youth tells that the noble family tried hard to find him, just to deliver that gift. The tavern owner explains seriously that winning a mansion directly from a duke is a gigantic achievement. The hero agrees, saying the place is really spacious, but the man gets annoyed with the youth's slowness. The attendant points out that the number of properties represents the prestige and power of that noble family. He points out that the Duke gave up a symbol of power just to create a direct bond of friendship with him. The protagonist stays in absolute silence upon beginning to understand the real gravity of that whole situation. The tavern owner stares at him in a very intense way and asks seriously who he really is for the nobles. The youth tries to divert the subject, saying he is just a common guy, but the man does not fall for that simple disguise. To change the subject, the warrior places a bag quite heavy on the counter and thanks for all the support. The attendant observes the package with distrust and notices by the metallic noise that it is about much money. The hero confirms it is a cash payment for him, having given him shelter and great advice in the past. The owner says he is afraid to accept the money, but the hero states there is nothing scary in that. The youth suggests jokingly that the money is from a dangerous guy, but the man responds that this does not help. He confesses to being cheap by nature, but feels guilty for placing the friend in an insane situation. The youth mentions that make him hide someone wanted by a duke was a total madness on their part. The owner of the place confesses, trembling, that in truth he spent the whole time dying of fear of that situation. The youth just smiles in a way without grace, saying he manages to imagine perfectly the tension of him. The man says he wants to treat his customers well, and the hero states that it was great to have stayed at the inn. The attendant makes a joke to break the ice, but ends up getting quite embarrassed with the response. The warrior decides to prepare to leave and picks up his metal helmet that was on top of the counter. He puts on the equipment while he listens to the friend, asking in a friendly way for him to return in the future. The hero promises that for sure he will return to visit him, and the two say goodbye warmly there at the door. The youth leaves the establishment, and the owner turns his total attention to the bag full of shining coins. With much curiosity, he squats behind the counter to verify the mysterious content of the package. The man widens his eyes upon seeing a huge quantity of shining gold coins glowing for him. He stays completely perplexed without managing to believe in the absurd amount he received from the young warrior. The attendant thinks that a common guy would never give so much money and questions who he would really be. The story moves to the impressive and grand sacred church that represents a great power. In the church's main hall, two young women talk in a low tone, taking advantage of the tranquility of the place. Marie complains in a cute way, asking the other girl not to keep pitching her cheeks in that way. Nina holds the older sister's face, amazed at finally managing to see her after being healed. Marie stays a little without grace with the excessive affection and asks who she thinks she is holding there. The older sister questions how many times they are going to repeat that same funny game on that day. Upon discovering that the youngest is doing this on purpose, the young woman just sighs in a resigned way. Nina sits on the bench beside and jokes, saying the way of speaking of her older sister is a little rude. She also advises the older one not to cross her legs, so as not to ruin her beautiful and elegant appearance. Marie coughs, feigning formality, and says there is no problem acting like that since they are only among family. Marie's blue eyes shine with determination upon thinking about something very important at that moment. She proudly states that she possesses excellent skills to act in an impeccable way when necessary. Nina just stares at her with disdain, causing the older sister to get slightly uncomfortable with the look. Marie complains that the sister became much more proper and demanding since she totally recovered her sight. Nina responds that there is no problem relaxing from time to time, but the sister points out that she relaxes every day. The two continue arguing in an infantile way, while the banquet food remains untouched on the table. Marie thinks happily about how her youngest sister became much more radiant and happy after returning to see. The little one continues gesturing cutely, remembering the happy happy moments she had in the last few days. The older sister reflects that she had never seen her so full of life and expressive in her entire existence. Nina looks up in a thoughtful way and praises the black, armored warrior for his incredible attitudes. Marie agrees and highlights that he saved her alone and used a legendary magic potion without charging anything for this. The youngest sister compliments, saying he used 3 rare potions just to guarantee her recovery. Nina gets flushed and says the youth is perfect and for sure makes the ideal type of her beloved older sister. Marie questions if he is her type, and the youngest responds she still doesn't have preferences for having been healed a little while ago. The older sister smiles and advises the youngest not to focus her romantic attentions on the legendary Jet Black. She explains that a warrior so powerful for sure possesses hundreds of suitors disputing for him. Nina retorts in a cute way, saying that exactly for being young, she still can have a chance with the hero. Marie smiles mischievously upon seeing the youngest sister get totally red and animated with the discussion. Nina makes a little pout, annoyed, while the older one continues having fun with her sincere reactions. A nun opens the door and warns in a respectful way that the time has come for the two to assume their duties. Marie responds with a beautiful smile, guaranteeing they will take care of everything, while the youngest becomes slightly discouraged. The two begin to walk together through the hallway to start the daily obligations inside the temple. Nina responds in a shy way with flushed cheeks, while she follows her sister's quick steps. She fixes her determined gaze on the horizon, mentalizing the next meeting with the hero who saved her life. The Ansage sisters continue walking, focused on performing their daily services with total dedication. In the depth of their hearts, both wait anxiously for the day they will be able to meet the warrior again. The black, armored hero continues being a legendary and extremely mysterious figure for everyone. 3 days later, Mary appears seated on a wooden bench, complaining about being completely exhausted. At that moment, Liffy arises at the location and jokes, saying she is lazy and resting again. Startled, Marie recognizes the voice of the friend and tries to defend herself, saying she is only on her break. Liffy says it's been a long time since they saw each other and remembers she shouldn't be there in the backyard without permission. The nun asks for forgiveness, laughing, and invites the friend to sit right beside her to talk better. The scene focuses on the beautiful garden of the church that serves as scenery for the quiet reunion of these two friends. The two young women accommodate themselves comfortably on the wooden bench, surrounded by beautiful green vegetation. Marie asks if little Karen didn't come along, or if she really resolved to make that visit alone. The redhead explains that the youngest sister stayed outside, talking animatedly with Nina while she works. She reveals that she just delivered a letter from their father, confirming that the hero's reward was decided. Mary comments relieved that her youngest sister didn't stop repeating every day that she wanted to see the warrior again. Leva laughs and says the Karen is no different since she finally found someone else to stay attached to besides herself. The redhead tells, amused, that the little one basically lives seated on the black, armored hero's lap now. She adds that even being called to attention, the girl insisted on continuing there on his lap the whole time. Marie smiles and notes that the warrior really possesses a natural charm capable of attracting the people around him. Leafia agrees fully and declares in a passionate way that he is the most wonderful man she has ever met. The nun finds that declaration very strong, while the friend guarantees that she will understand when she meets him. The young woman asks if the warrior received a big reward in the meeting, and the redhead stays without knowing what to say. Marie insists with a begging look, begging for her to tell the details to serve as future reference. She explains that her family still hasn't decided the reward and wants to avoid giving something inappropriate or very simple. The redhead makes a secret and threatens to reveal the true personality of the friend in case she tells someone else. Livia approaches with care and asks for forgiveness for needing to speak in a whisper tone to keep the secret. She begins revealing that the first part of the big reward handed to him was a luxury mansion. Then she cites that the warrior also received an extremely generous quantity in gold coins. To finalize, she reveals that the third item was the prestigious official seal of the influential noble family. Marie is completely shocked and asks with indignation if that was really all they gave him. She highlights that he saved a life using a legendary magic potion, and that reward seems insignificant. The redhead agrees that it seems little but explains in a way without grace that they couldn't do anything to change this. Marie retorts with firmness, stating that for sure they could have offered something much better to the warrior. The redhead reveals that the hero didn't want to receive anything and resisted much to accept even what was already offered. The nun is incredulous and says that looks like a bad taste joke, because nobody like that would really exist. Lifaya maintains the silence with a serious expression, showing she is speaking the most absolute truth about him. She repeats that she has been saying from the beginning that that armored warrior is the most incredible person in the world. The redhead remembers that even their father confessed that it would be impossible to equate himself to the hero's moral greatness. She adds that the Duke is breaking his head to think about how to act in the next meeting with the warrior. The nun notices that the Duke feels he needs to try much to manage to talk on the same level as him. The redhead comments that her father always stays serious when talking about the hero because something in the warrior impressed him truly. Marie reflects in silence that if the hero caused that impact on a Duke, he must be someone extraordinary. She points out with a corner smile that both had their youngest sisters saved by an unbelievable person. The redhead agrees and says that only someone powerful enough to intimidate nobles would be capable of saving them. The nun asks if in the depth she really believes that the warrior is part of the legendary Vertar faction. The redhead reveals that she received express orders from her father to never do anything that could make him their enemy. Marie understands that the situation would be complicated if he were from the faction, because it would make defining the reward difficult. She reflects that he is in a position of great power and probably gets what he wants without difficulties. Lifaya comments intrigued that during the conversation the youth seemed much happier with the money than with the seal. The nun is totally confused with that information because, for her, makes not the slightest logical sense. She argues that money anyone manages by working, but obtaining the prestigious seal of a duke is impossible. A seal guarantees the permanent support of the ducal house for the whole life, being something much envied by everyone. Marie theorizes that if he is from the Vertar faction, he already has the Emperor's support and prefers money to another seal. The redhead retorts, saying he was happy with the money so that he can help even more needy people. She imagines that if he needed money, he wouldn't manage to buy weapons and equipment so fantastic. Marie is speechless with his generosity, while the friend jokes again about him being her type. The nun gets totally flushed and indignant, asking where that sudden subject came from again. Lifaya just laughs in a fun way and comments about how little Nino is quite smart for these things. Marie retorts, saying the redhead also can't talk about anything because she exudes a strong energy of being in love with him. The nun jokes, saying she will tell everything to the warrior in case the friend continues playing, unaware. Meanwhile, in the church's hallway, little Nina walks animatedly beside Karen, anxious for the meeting. She remembers that at the beginning they stayed desperate for not managing to locate a warrior in armor so flashy. Nina holds her wooden staff with concern, thinking if he would have been punished for using the legendary potion. Karen retorts, saying the hero for sure would give her a scolding in case he saw her blaming herself in that manner. She remembers the warrior's advice, saying he would be happier if they enjoyed life in freedom. Hearing that calms Nina's heart, who smiles relieved, thanking the friend for sharing his words. Karen adds that he didn't regret anything, and Nina supposes he may have acted against superior orders. The redhead says that with his great achievements, the guild would never accept losing him because of a slip like that. The white-haired young woman agrees with a dreamy look, finding that attitude so like the generous warrior. The two friends agree on the bench about the hero being someone who never gives up when he believes he is correct. She asks how long he will stay in the town, and Karen responds that he still has many duties over there. Leafia smiles in a friendly way, remembering that he ended up refusing the invitation to dine, alleging he was busy. The girls imagine that at night he must do patrols or help the needy, taking advantage of the dark disguise. Nina turns bright red and sighs, thinking about how amazing the warrior in the armor is. Karen gives a mischievous smile and promises to share some very interesting information when she sees her friend so excited. She whispers, revealing that the hero usually eats lunch at a simple tavern because he enjoys everyday meals. The young girl with white hair keeps the name of the place in her mind, her cheeks flushed with shyness. Suddenly, she stands up from the bench, determined, startling Karen, who asks if she really plans to go there. Completely embarrassed, she tries to deny it, saying she would never do such a thing before they receive their official reward. She starts to walk away in a hurry with quick steps, while Karen watches her from the bench with great suspicion. The redhead has a drop of sweat on her head, wondering if her friend really intends to leave her behind all alone. The warrior in the black armor walks calmly down the street, whistling happily on a beautiful sunny day. He approaches the entrance of the tavern with light steps to have his usual meal in peace. However, inside, Nina is already at the counter, asking the server what time the hero usually comes in. Warrior notices the commotion through a crack in the door and is surprised to see the young girl asking questions about him. Marie points her finger in a threatening manner, making the poor owner of the place tremble with terror under such pressure. Desperate, he shouts out the secret, revealing that the warrior usually appears right at that exact time. The protagonist hears the shouting and realizes that his friend is going through a real interrogation in there. The nun continues to pressure the tavern owner, asking at which table the hero usually sits to eat. She demands the answer in a firm and scary voice, giving the man no room to try and escape. Terrified, the server quickly points his finger toward the warrior's favorite seat to save his own skin. The two continue their detailed interrogation about the young man's favorite dishes and his most recent meals. The owner quickly shows the option he ate the day before, and Nina makes a point of ordering exactly the same thing. The protagonist is left completely stunned to realize that his friend can shout in such a bizarrely high-pitched tone. The young man thinks that, although they seem kind, it would be much safer to turn around and avoid entering the place today. He reflects that it would be cowardly to ignore the situation since the tavern owner has helped him a lot in difficult times. The hero decides to face the danger and enters the place, hoping the tension will ease with the arrival of a new customer. Looking closer, he confirms that the poor guy at the counter is suffering from absurd psychological pressure. The server gestures desperately, asking for calm while trying to meet the intense demands of the two girls. The hero watches from afar, sending positive energy to help his friend hold on a little longer in that situation. The warrior finally takes the first step and approaches the counter, where the trio is gathered under great expectation. The warrior tries to take a step back, deciding to pretend he didn't see anything so he won't be dragged into it. Suddenly, an absolute silence takes over the whole tavern as the four of them stare at each other awkwardly. The hero is desperate to see the conversation end so abruptly at such a tense moment. The nun in the helmet orders the young girl to hold her position, and Nina agrees obediently to the instruction. The hero is startled to realize that the nun in the helmet starts walking slowly toward him. He tries to ask the tavern owner for help, reminding him that he only entered the place to try and help him earlier. The server just thanks him in an amusing way and promises to make it up to him with a wonderful plate of food. The warrior approaches Nina, asking for her order, and she reacts with shyness and very red cheeks. The protagonist notices with surprise that the owner of the place took advantage of the distraction to slip away quietly. Nina turns to look at the hero again with a beautiful smile on her face, showing all her enormous happiness. The scene focuses on her wrist adorned with a beautiful gold bracelet that has a small cross pendant. The shiny gold star-shaped pendant stands out under the soft light coming through the window. Nina asks shyly if he can still remember her after all the time he spent away. The The warrior recognizes her with joy and says he is very happy to see her doing so well and fully recovered from her blindness. The girl is immensely radiant and replies that she is also very happy to see him in great health. Nina asks her guard not to be hard on the owner since she herself asked him to keep the secret. The nun in the helmet bows immediately, offering sincere apologies to the owner of the place for her behavior. The server gestures nervously, asking her not to worry, and thanks her immensely for her kindness. She comments on how the young man looks different in those new clothes, and that she almost didn't recognize him at first. Nina does a cute little spin in her nun's habit and asks with a smile if the new look suits her. The warrior compliments her nicely, saying it will look even better when she is a little older. The girl thanks him, and the young man confesses that he really didn't imagine she was part of a church order. She maintains her radiant smile while the nun in the helmet remains standing behind her in total silence. The guard stares at the hero intensely and suspiciously, leaving the protagonist quite tense under her gaze. The young man feels quite uncomfortable with the heavy atmosphere and decides to try to break the ice somehow. He points to his own eye and asks in a friendly way how her vision has been since the cure. Nina leans in close and responds excitedly that it is perfect. Thanks to the wonderful help she received from him, the warrior performs a few quick tests with his fingers, and the girl gets them all right happily, proving her cure. Behind the helmet, the young man smiles, relieved to confirm for himself that her vision is 100%. She confesses with emotion that she is now enjoying life like never before after years of not seeing her family's faces. The hero feels a little awkward with the deep statement and asks her not to talk about such dramatic things. He tells her to keep her head up and focus on having fun from now on so the medicine is worth it. Nina agrees with determination and promises, with flushed cheeks, that she will do her best to enjoy life. The owner of the place finally returns, bringing steaming, well-served plates with a friendly smile. Nina thanks him happily upon seeing the huge amount of delicious food that was placed right in front of her. The hero asks if she really ordered the large portion, and the young girl confesses shyly that she did. The warrior warns her that that portion is recommended for adults, and she admits she wanted to eat the same as him. She confesses with a very cute smile that this was the main reason she visited the tavern that day. The young man thinks thoughtfully about her innocent attitude, while the girl agrees quite enthusiastically. He says he will help her finish the food if she feels full, leaving the guard in the helmet quite shocked. Marie feels awkward about the hero's offer of help, while the little one thanks him kindly for his generosity. The warrior gestures in a friendly way and asks them not to wait for him and to start eating soon. He reminds them that their time is limited and that it would be a shame to let the meat get cold after it was just prepared. Both girls join their hands in a quick prayer of thanks before starting the delicious meal. Each of them takes the first bite of the dish, savoring the succulent meat with expressions of great delight. They are extremely surprised by the incredible flavor and confirm with flushed cheeks that the food is great. The warrior agrees quite proudly and happily repeats that the food at that place is of high quality. The owner of the place slams a mug on the table and questions, annoyed, why he is acting so proud. The young man complains about the rude service, and the owner retorts, saying he almost died of fright because of him today. The protagonist has a drop of sweat on his head, remembering that he had already taken the blame for everything to the guard earlier. Nina comments, laughing, that the hero and the owner of the place seem to be extremely close friends. The owner complains in a friendly way, saying it is difficult to deal with someone who keeps so many secrets. He gets startled when he realizes he ended up speaking informally in front of important authorities. The warrior just observes his friend's blunder with amusement as he let his informal way of speaking slip out. The nun in the helmet ensures she can overlook the slip as long as young Nina doesn't feel bothered. Nina says with a beautiful smile that she would like it if everyone could talk in a simpler and more natural way. The owner of the place begs mentally to be spared from that extremely tense social situation. The hero finds the owner's nervousness funny, and the man retorts that he is the strange person there. The young girl returns her focus to her delicious meal, carefully cutting the hot meat on her plate. Nina wipes her mouth and apologizes for asking such a sudden question during that moment. Both men turn their attention to the young girl, who shows she wants to ask an important question. She explains calmly that her time staying outside the church temple is quite limited. Because of this, the young girl suggests setting an exact date to visit him and be able to thank him properly. She insists on the idea with determination while the warrior in black armor remains in total silence. Behind the armor, the hero widens his eyes, extremely perplexed by the girl's direct suggestion. The owner decides to move away discreetly while the hero asks, confused, if he should visit the cathedral. The young girl gestures energetically and clarifies that, in fact, they are the ones who plan to go to his residence. She blushes and apologizes in case he feels uncomfortable, since they already know the location of his house. The hero is startled, wondering how she obtained that information, since the mansion was given to him only a short time ago. He tries to disguise his shock and just asks to schedule the visit on a weekend because of his work. The girl suggests next Sunday at noon, and the hero accepts, asking who else will come with her. She starts listing that her influential parents will come for the personal meeting with the warrior in armor. Nina adds that she and her dear older sister will also be present in the visiting group. To finish, she says happily that several temple guards will also accompany the noble family. The young man is desperate to realize how powerful and influential that young girl with white hair's lineage is. The hero asks if he can choose who will actually come to the mansion, leaving the girl quite intrigued. He says sincerely that he would prefer her parents not to go there, leaving Nina extremely confused. The warrior gestures, explaining that he doesn't want a formal ceremony and prefers to avoid attracting outside attention. The owner of the place mocks the comment, remembering that he wears extremely flashy black armor. The young man has a bored expression because of his friend's provocation, who never misses an opportunity to joke. He argues that her parents must be very busy and that it would be bad to take them away from their daily duties. The hero thinks he is deathly afraid of important nobles, while trying to convince her to leave the parents out of it. He jokes, asking if she doesn't trust coming just with her sister, and both respond energetically. The nun in the helmet agrees with the decision and asks the hero to pass the message on to his superiors. She reveals with a discreet smile that she already intended to do exactly that from the beginning of that conversation. The hero celebrates mentally upon realizing he managed to escape having to face the great authorities. The guard in the helmet watches in silence, while young Nina continues eating her dish happily. The little redhead finishes her whole meal, leaving the plate clean, and prepares to speak with the young man. Both sisters stand up, thanking him for the food, and say goodbye. Anxious for the Sunday reunion, the hero waves back nicely, while hoping that everything goes well at the next meeting. They finally leave the place with calm steps, while the warrior remains standing near the counter. As soon as the two leave, the hero puts his hand on his head, letting out a long sigh of total relief and exhaustion. The owner of the place brings a new meal for him and asks ironically who is really tired there. The young man complains about mental fatigue, but the owner retorts, remembering that he talked to them as equals. Exhausted, the hero just rests his head on the wooden counter, agreeing that both are completely worn out. The server comments, surprised, that he already knew he was special but never imagined he would see him stand up to the church. The young man looks at the horizon dramatically while the owner of the place asks him to stop that scene. The man realizes that the hero continues to treat him humbly, even after gaining so much wealth and power. The warrior rests his helmet on the counter, confessing with sincerity that acting normal really helps him relax. The server jokes, asking him not to sue him for insult, and the hero ensures he would never do such a thing. The protagonist thinks the guard in the helmet is scary, but the tavern owner says the church soldiers are elite. The young man with green hair agrees with this and warns that his friend can now tell everything he knows about his identity. The owner of the place shouts, annoyed, saying he should have warned him about that earlier because he thought he was going to die of terror. He comments in a relaxed way that the guards went easy on him, but the young man doesn't quite understand what that means. The owner explains that they didn't use authority to threaten him and only maintained a firm posture for the sake of the young girl. He adds that firm and determined posture is just the way the guards use to show loyalty. The hero listens to everything in silence while eating and realizes that the life of a bodyguard must also be very difficult. The tavern owner comments that serving influential people is always like that, and that the young man should understand that very well. He recalls the beautiful words the warrior used to defend the honor of the other, leaving the hero surprised. The young man smiles awkwardly and confesses that, in truth, he understands nothing of that and just said something that sounded nice. The server says that not understanding those things only proves that he is in a position too high to worry about it. The man is shocked to think that the hero might have an even more important position than the church authorities. The protagonist laughs awkwardly and explains that, in truth, it is the opposite, and that he is in a position too low, if anything. The tavern owner decides to end the subject right there, leaving the young man lamenting that the misunderstanding only got worse. Inside the moving carriage, little Nina comments very happily that she loved eating the same dish as the hero. The guard asks what impressions she had of him, and the young girl responds convincingly that he is a very strong man. Nina smiles in a mysterious way and clarifies that, in fact, she was referring to his inner personality. The guard apologizes and confesses she was so tense under his constant vigilance that she couldn't even think. The young girl with white hair is extremely surprised to hear that her protector was feeling watched there. The warrior explains that people lower their guard while they eat, and that the hero was probably testing her. She remembers with bitterness that the guard failed gravely by allowing the young noble to be kidnapped in the past. The guard laments not having noticed his presence and says that talking to the owner was no excuse to relax. Nina suggests that his presence might be weak, but the warrior retorts that it is a huge difference in level. The guard theorizes that the hero foresaw the confrontation with the owner and that the exact timing of everything cannot be a coincidence. She continues to think, imagining if the warrior in black armor already had previous information about their route. The warrior ponders about his intelligence to read situations and warns that she will report everything to the girl's father. Nina asks worriedly if she is referring to the warrior's warning about refusing the parents' gratitude. The guard agrees, saying that someone in his position would never miss the chance to make contact with influential nobles. She finds it very strange that he refused such a big favor, claiming only that he didn't want to attract attention. Hearing that detailed analysis makes Nina realize with apprehension that the young man's excuse was just a pretext. The warrior says that his natural attitude when interacting with the young girl does not match someone who avoids powerful people. She recalls the rumors about him being from the Vertar faction and that, because of that, he must be very accustomed to nobles. A thoughtful and quite tense silence settles between the two inside the luxurious church carriage. The guard fears that some serious problem is happening in the cathedral and that the hero has an important motive. She reflects that a warrior like him would never make such a serious request about her parents for a silly reason. The warrior decides that they must speak with her father immediately and ask for permission to have the coachman hurry. Nina agrees quickly with her protector's suggestion, showing that she is quite worried about everything. The guard leans out the carriage window to give urgent instructions to hurry to the coachman. With the command, the carriage starts to run at high speed through the sunny streets toward the mansion. The carriage finally reaches its destination in front of the imposing and grand mansion of the influential family. Inside, Nina's older sister comments, surprised about the fact that they had received a personal request from him. She becomes thoughtful and, with flushed cheeks, imagines if the hero really has such refined taste. Nina notices her sister's nervousness and jokes, saying that her voice and her legs are trembling quite a lot from fear. The sister tries to explain herself, saying she didn't expect the warrior to refuse the presence of the parents at the meeting. She says she understands his motives after hearing about Vertar, while Nina ensures that he is a great person. The young girl with white hair asks, hesitantly, if the hero in armor is really someone generous in theory. Nina smiles happily and responds with all certainty that he is as generous as her dear older sister. The sister gets excited and suggests going to the meeting acting naturally, and Nina agrees, saying it would be wonderful. The sister changes her expression instantly and asks comically if Nina is trying to get her killed. She explains that it would be easier to be herself, but that a good impression only comes from a much more polished version. Nina smiles and says with a lot of affection that she prefers her sister acting in that natural way. The older sister smiles on the sofa and responds that she will take that advice into consideration from now on. She changes the subject, but comments with admiration that the mysterious hero really is an incredible person. The sister explains that he was the first to notice the actions of the new suspicious religious group and raise the alert. Nina wonders how he gets so much information, but the sister says it's better they don't even try to find out. The older one warns that if they try to investigate, he might end up seeing the two as dangerous enemies. She fears that in the worst-case scenario, the warrior will decide that they aren't worth it and cut ties. The young girl adds that no matter how they look at him, the hero behaves like a true monster. She looks at the window and jokes, saying he might very well be listening to their conversation right now. Nina finds it funny and says that's impossible because there are many guards protecting the entrance to the mansion. Suddenly, both hear with astonishment the clear sound of mysterious footsteps walking on the ceiling of the place. Nina is completely paralyzed with terror and calls for her sister while the footsteps continue echoing on the ceiling. The sister tries to hide her fear, suggesting it must be just some animal that ended up climbing onto the roof. Nina thinks the warrior in black armor is actually just protecting the two in case something bad happens. Both tremble nervously upon realizing that the guards at the main gate didn't even notice the hero's invasion. And with all this accumulated tension, the long-awaited day of the promised meeting between them finally arrives. At the tavern, the owner comments that he would be very nervous in his place, but the young man thanks him for the meal calmly. The warrior remembers mentally that today is the day of the visit of the powerful Ansage family from the church to his house. The young man is relieved to have managed to ensure that at least her influential parents did not attend. He reflects thoughtfully about having already rehearsed perfectly in his mind how he should act in this first meeting. His only concern at the moment is the fact that he has to talk to Nina's sister for the first time. However, the young man's plan is simply to dump all the responsibility of the conversation onto little Nina. He looks at his black helmet and celebrates proudly, thinking he has come up with a perfect plan for the meeting. The protagonist sighs and confesses to his friend that there is something quite worrying hammering in his head today. He reveals that the Duke recently sent a personal housekeeper to manage his whole new mansion. The young man complains that she keeps so much distance that he feels lonely, and the owner feels sorry for the woman. Suddenly, a loud noise startles the young man with green hair, who is left without a reaction to his friend's attitude. The hero supposes his friend lost his sympathy for him after getting a scary scolding from the guard in the helmet. 2 mugs full of drink are served while the warrior starts to observe the movement in the tavern. He notices with surprise that the place seems much buzzier and full of new employees working. The owner of the establishment smiles in a friendly way and reveals happily that all of that is thanks to the warrior. The man explains that after Nina's visit, all the customers started to come and order the same dish she ate. The young man thinks to himself that Nina really is very popular and that in the future she will become a great beauty. The owner remembers something important, warns that he also has very valuable information to share. He asks if the hero has heard about a new religious group that emerged, picking a fight with the church. The warrior stays alert upon hearing about the problem, realizing that the situation seems to be on a large scale. He wants to know if his friend heard this from a customer, and the owner confirms, saying they are spreading malicious rumors. The owner says they are trying to create internal division in the church and weaken the great influence of the family once and for all. The young man reflects that it must be very difficult to be in power and always end up involved in complicated problems. The owner finds his calm reaction natural, supposing the warrior already knew everything, but the hero tries to deny it. The man jokes that he would give an evasive answer, and the protagonist is left not understanding that suspicion. The young man with green hair tries to change the course of the conversation, saying the church itself should handle it. The owner agrees but warns that the new group emerged out of nowhere with a lot of strength and is generating enormous confusion. The young man tries to reassure him, saying that in the end, the church is famous and possesses a lot of military power. The owner approaches with a suspicious look and asks if the warrior hasn't already acted behind the scenes in secret. The hero feels quite awkward with that insinuation and questions the motive for his friend to stare at him like that. The man warns he doesn't believe in his innocence, but the young man celebrates for having managed to get very useful data there. The warrior plans to ask about the subject directly to Nina to see what she knows about the group. The owner supports the idea, but the protagonist argues that it's not as if the girls trusted him that much. The server charges an obscene fee for the information, and the young man retorts, saying he only said the obvious today. The tavern owner says that because he brought Nina, his food will be on the house for a long time. The protagonist is very surprised by the generous offer, and the friend asks him not to be shy. The young man feels immensely happy to realize that kindness from his friend will help him save a lot. He says goodbye happily to the owner and reflects that doing good always brings great things back to life. Already outside with his black armor, the warrior sighs, relieved to be completely satisfied. At the mansion, the housekeeper asks, doubting, if he really needs to wear that heavy armor at the meeting. The hero responds that he prefers to keep the disguise for safety, since you never know what might happen. The woman comments that he must be even stronger fighting without weapons, leaving the young man quite intrigued. The protagonist reflects that housekeeper sent by the Duke has been acting in a slightly scary way. Scared behind the helmet, the warrior asks immediately where she managed to get that information from. The housekeeper clarifies that the data came directly from the Duke, and that the information is kept under total secrecy. The hero celebrates for being in armor, because that way she can't see his face of complete despair. He clears his throat and asks if she will guide the visitors, while thinking that her serious posture makes things difficult. The young man suggests taking them to the office of the mansion, and the housekeeper agrees, saying it's a great idea. He decides to follow through with this plan, and the woman accepts the order promptly, showing a lot of professionalism. The warrior admits in his thoughts that he feels a lot of envy for how the housekeeper manages to act calmly. She asks what should be done with the church guards, who will certainly accompany the young noblewoman. The young man asks to leave them waiting outside, because he prefers to talk without being watched all the time. He suggests that the guards be free to walk around the house, and the housekeeper accepts the decision without problems. The woman looks at him surprised and asks if the warrior is really sure about giving them so much freedom. The hero is confused by her reaction, but the housekeeper ensures that if he is in agreement, there will be no problem. The young man notices her slight hesitation and hopes that sudden surprise is not a bad sign for him. He changes the subject and suggests serving some of the delicious sweets he received when he got the family seal. The housekeeper turns quickly with wide eyes, totally in shock at the warrior's suggestion. She stammers, very confused, without being able to understand how the young man plans to act with such casualness there. Trying to recover her composure, the housekeeper responds shyly that she supposes there are no problems with that. The young man decides to do it and takes the opportunity to ask the price of those sweets to buy more in the future. He almost faints from fright to hear that a single box of those sweets costs 50,000 gold coins. The hero asks about the price of the jewelry ring he received, and she estimates it is worth between 5 and 10 million. Facing his silence, the woman asks if he thought it was little and offers to inform the Duke discreetly. The young man denies it, desperate, saying that giving such expensive gifts without a reason only makes his head ache. He asks if he seems greedy, but the housekeeper denies it, saying the Duke only sent word to inform in case something happens. The hero thinks the care is exaggerated, but she explains that this is just the way nobles maintain their honor. The warrior in black armor asks in a friendly way if there is something the housekeeper would like to receive. He scratches his head awkwardly, explaining that he feels bad for just receiving things and wants to give something in return. She refuses politely, remembering that she is only an employee and that she is already very well rewarded by the Duke. The hero insists in a relaxed way, asking her not to be so rigid and reveal what she really likes. Yielding to his friendly insistence, the housekeeper confesses with flushed cheeks that she likes sweets very much. The young man gets quite excited and promises to bring a large amount of sweets for her on the next visit. He warns that he will wait in the office and asks her to follow through with the agreed plan as soon as the young girls arrive. The warrior in black armor finally enters the office, while the housekeeper watches him go up the stairs. The woman decides that she needs to report that unexpected attitude of the hero directly to the Duke as soon as possible. She trembles nervously, thinking that that very informal language is exactly what is expected of someone from Vertar. A little later, the carriage door opens, and the important visits are received with a lot of courtesy. Young Nina and Marie get off accompanied by their imposing guards and walk toward the grand mansion. The housekeeper receives the young noblewoman in the entrance hall with an impeccable and respectful posture as always. Both enter the room and greet the warrior in black armor with a beautiful smile and a lot of elegance in their gestures. The door of the grand room is closed gently right after, leaving the visitors alone with the owner of the mansion. Marie looks at the housekeeper and comments, surprised that she didn't expect to find her working back at that place. The housekeeper smiles and explains that the generous warrior insisted on keeping her position when he got the mansion. Marie ponders if the warrior really trusts her, since he could have put someone more capable there. The housekeeper clarifies that she never met him and that the hero has no way of judging her skills. Marie retorts, saying that in the end, they are dealing with a legendary and mysterious warrior. The housekeeper remains in silence with a quite serious and thoughtful expression about that situation. Marie suggests ending that confusing debate, and the housekeeper agrees, relieved to change the subject for good. The truth is that the warrior in black armor is a very reserved man who doesn't give clues about his life. Marie comments that it must be tense living with him, but the housekeeper says that even the Duke bows before him. She adds that the hero himself dismissed all the guards of the mansion, claiming it was something very stifling. The hero only confirms that eccentric decision, leaving the young blonde girl quite surprised. Marie jokes, saying that he basically challenged anyone to attack him, and that he has the strength to back that up. The housekeeper ensures that being under the protection of that man is the safest thing someone could wish for. Mary finds it funny and asks if they are really free to enjoy the mansion while the meeting takes place. The housekeeper confirms decidedly, saying that those were the exact instructions passed by the hero. Marie asks her opinion on the subject, suggesting she must know the real meaning of his words. The woman warns she can only speculate, and the young girl in the helmet accepts, hearing the guess with great interest. The housekeeper says the hero certainly didn't mean for the guards to just relax or do tourism. She clenches her own hands with seriousness, stating that there must be a much greater purpose behind that. She explains that protecting the young noble is their main duty, and that the hero would never order them to abandon that. The woman theorizes that if they stayed locked in a waiting room, they wouldn't be able to act quickly in an attack. She believes the young man's order was for them to act according to their own judgment in case of danger. Marie becomes thoughtful and concludes that from the warrior's point of view, he simply doesn't trust their help. The housekeeper shakes her head and clarifies that the hero's intention is not, in fact, lack of trust. She says he wants to teach them not to depend on outside help because he will not be there to save them always. Marie remembers with emotion Nina's beautiful smile and finally understands the hero's great life lesson. The young girl thanks her immensely for the analysis and asks the housekeeper to convey her sincere gratitude to the young man. In the office, the warrior feels tense without understanding the reason for the two girls acting in such a serious way. Marie and Nina stare at the young man with extremely deep looks, leaving the environment's atmosphere heavy. The young man starts to sweat from nervousness, thinking they are misinterpreting every simple word he says. Marie asks for permission very politely and asks if she can ask just one personal question to the warrior. She wants to know how she should adjust her conduct after he unmasked everything, leaving the hero not understanding anything. The young man has a huge question mark in his head and repeats, confused, her question about his future conduct. The hero tries to disguise his total perplexity with the subject while Nina lets out a sigh of concern. The little one with white hair is extremely embarrassed to see the size of the confusion created by her sister. Behind the helmet, the protagonist cries in despair, imploring mentally for someone to come and save him from there. He tries to justify himself, saying that everything is just a huge misunderstanding and that he discovered nothing. The hero explains that he just wanted them to feel at ease and asks them to get to the main subject soon. Nina pulls her sister's skirt discreetly and whispers, saying that insistence is affecting her dignity. The warrior in black armor is desperate to realize that the mood of the meeting is about to ruin for good. He tries to calm the spirits, saying that this type of embarrassing situation really happens to anyone. Marie lets out a long sigh of defeat, confessing that she hid her secret for years, and Nina laughs at the one bet. The protagonist is left completely without reaction and without words with that sudden change of behavior. He is startled to see the young girl, serious and imposing before, transform suddenly into someone so relaxed. The girl now seems like a totally different person, leaving the hero extremely shocked by the transformation. Marie fixes her hair in a relaxed way and decides to accept the warrior's advice to truly relax. She asks with a smile for him not to find that rude, while the young man finally understands her true face. The young girl prepares to start the official thank you, but the warrior interrupts her quite anxiously. The hero says he prefers to talk about another subject first, because he finds it tiring to debate noble rewards. Little Nina is quite surprised and curious to know what would be that theme so important for the warrior. The hero reveals he wants to talk about the mysterious and new religious group that started to make trouble with the church. He asks directly if things are under control in the church, leaving both sisters quite attentive. Marie asks if he doesn't mind talking about this first, and the hero responds that he prefers it much more. The protagonist says they can leave the thank yous for later, and she thanks him immensely for that flexibility. Behind the helmet, the young man is quite confused and wonders for what reason she is thanking him so much for this. Marie becomes thoughtful and starts to question herself if the warrior in black armor can predict absolutely everything. The young girl then prepares to explain the situation with details, says she is counting on his support for this. She explains that they have already prepared measures against the new religious group and that all of this was only possible thanks to the hero. The girl reveals that their plan is to lure the enemies out before they become too strong and slander the church. The protagonist is shocked to see how a simple conversation ended up becoming a war strategy meeting. They reveal that they spread the false rumor that the whole Ansage family would be out of the great cathedral that day. Since the enemies are very active, the sisters believe they will take this unique chance to attack the temple. The young man agrees with their plan and admits that today would indeed be the perfect day for an ambush by the rivals. Upon hearing the confirmation of the warrior in black armor, the young girl with white hair widens her eyes, quite surprised. The hero asks if their parents are still at the cathedral, while protected by guards, and the young girl confirms happily. The young man says everything should be fine, and Marie asks if he really believes everything will be resolved safely. The warrior responds yes and adds that always being on guard will help protect the place against any danger. Both sisters are in absolute silence, staring at the hero after hearing that advice so direct and comforting. He says that the evil always pay for what they do and asks them to send a thank you for the work of the parents. Marie repeats his words, quite confused, and tries to understand the real meaning of that message, so unexpected. Nina is also intrigued by the message and wonders why the warrior would say something like that to the church leaders. The young man just smiles awkwardly behind the armor and asks them just to deliver the message without worrying. A deep and tense silence takes over the room, while both girls try to process what they just heard. In the temple, the guards question the bishops if they should really stay standing there, as this could ruin their reputation. The priest with glasses sighs and says he understands the gravity of this and that he also feels very guilty about the situation. However, he states they decided to trust fully in the hero's words and that they are not going to change their opinion. Now, one of the guards clenches his fist, annoyed, thinking it is ridiculous to believe that someone can predict the future with such precision. He thinks, indignant, that it is impossible for someone like that to exist, and that the warrior in black armor is just an outsider. The man continues suspicious and wonders how a complete stranger managed to obtain so much important information. To him, the mysterious warrior is just saying things that seem plausible to deceive everyone in the cathedral. He grumbles mentally that nothing is going to happen, and that staying there waiting is just a huge waste of time for everyone. The guard is increasingly annoyed and stressed from being forced to follow orders based on mere hunches of others. An hour passes and the man complains again, saying that everything is always like this, and that they should go back to real work. Half an hour later, he stumps impatiently and rants that that's enough of wasting time with that waiting without any sense. 2 hours pass while the religious leaders remain calm, drinking tea and reading documents without any rush. The guard bites his lips from so much anger for not being able to stand seeing that passivity of his superiors in the church. When he decides that he is going to tell everyone to leave, a soldier invades the room desperate, shouting for an urgent report. The grumpy guard is completely paralyzed with surprise to hear that something is really happening at the place. The messenger warns that the new religious group is approaching quickly to the cathedral, carrying protest signs. He alerts that the invaders may try to protest at the entrance or even invade and take control of the sacred temple. The bishop with glasses assumes command immediately and orders the first security units to run to the entrance. He commands the other units to surround the surroundings, to arrest the troublemakers, and not let any of them escape from there. The religious leader states with firmness that they will confront the rival group and refute all the accusations in public. He declares that everyone present will be witnesses of the truth, and the guards respond promptly, accepting the command. Back at the protagonist mansion, the conversation changes tone when the young man starts to speak in a quite hesitant way. He looks down and confesses with sincerity that he really doesn't need such a grandiose reward for the rescue. Nina implores him to accept the payment in gold and jewelry, saying that refusing would leave her family very awkward. The hero retorts, saying that receiving all that is, in truth, what leaves him in an extremely complicated situation. The little one with white hair bows and implores desperately for the warrior to accept the offer anyway. The young man in black armor starts to gesture in panic, not knowing how to react in front of so much insistence from the girl. Marie observes the scene and finds it scary the fact that the hero really has no interest in any of that wealth there. She admires his altruistic attitude, which put his own life at risk to save her sister without wanting anything in return. The warrior closes one of the chests and says that in no way can he accept all that, as it is an exaggerated reward. He points only to a small part of the gold coins and to the sacred protection seal on top of the table. The young man confesses in a relaxed way that receiving too much wealth leaves him with a big fear of suffering the consequences. Both sisters are left completely without words with the uncommon honesty of that powerful warrior in black armor. He clears his throat to change the subject and asks if their parents still plan to visit him to thank him personally. Nina confirms, saying that that visit is already totally decided, leaving the young man startled behind the helmet. Marie notices his nervousness and wonders if there is some big problem with the arrival of the church leaders. The warrior makes a sign with his hand and warns he would like to make two very important things clear to them. He explains that, in the first place, the gifts they brought today are already more than enough as a thank you. The young man adds that he doesn't want to receive more favors, and for that reason, there is no need for their parents to come there. Both sisters try to argue against that decision so firm, but the hero remains unyielding about the subject. He argues that he understands the question of appearances, but prefers that their parents focus on other priorities at the moment. Marie repeats the sentence quite confused, trying to decipher the enigma hidden behind that suggestion so specific of his. He continues saying that important people like them have tasks much more urgent to solve in the city. Inside, the young man cries in despair, admitting he has no idea what would be those duties so important. The sisters start to analyze the young man's sentence, imagining if he already knows about the invasion that is about to happen in the cathedral. The hero says he prefers to see their time being spent on something that really helps to protect the city's population. He explains that he refused the greater part of the money so that the church can invest those resources in the common good of all. The warrior says that if the money is used in a useful way, it will serve as the greatest thank you he could receive. He points to the seal and says that the sacred item will protect him much better if the church itself also becomes strong. Both girls stare at the young man with bulging eyes, totally impressed with such wisdom and altruism. Marie lets out a sigh of relief and promises that the church will use every coin returned to do good as he wishes. Little Nina is very surprised by the quick decision of her older sister in accepting the hero's terms. The sister explains that there is no choice, since that is his wish, and the young man thanks mentally for having been understood. She reflects with admiration that the warrior's proposal is in fact an invitation for them to work together in the future. Marie remembers the comments of her redhead friend about the hero being happy to be able to help the needy indirectly. The redhead says she would like to see his power in the church and jokes, saying the warrior is exactly Mari's type. Remembering that silly little joke from her friend makes the young noble blush intensely with embarrassment in front of the warrior in armor. She is extremely embarrassed with herself and curses mentally her friend for making her remember that now. At that moment, the warrior leans in and warns that he also prepared something very special to give to both of them there. He extends his armored hand toward the little girl with white hair, who watches everything with quite a bit of curiosity. She opens her hands and is quite surprised to receive a beautiful and shiny gold key directly from the warrior. The young man reveals that that is the key to his own mansion, leaving the young girl open-mouthed and not knowing what to say. He explains he doesn't use the space much and says they can enter and leave the house whenever they want or need. The young man comments that he also gave a key to the Duke's daughters and that the mansion can serve as a meeting point. Hearing that invitation so generous makes Nina's heart beat much faster, and she gets flushed cheeks, taken by emotion. The little one throws herself into the arms of the hero in armor, thanking immensely for all his affection. Marie observes the scene skeptically and questions herself who in their right mind would give the house key to other people. She suspects the redhead friend also got a spare key and ended up keeping that secret from everyone. The hero gives an affectionate pat on Nina's head and turns to speak directly to the older sister again. Being called by surprise, the young noble gives a light jump of fright and responds quite shyly to the warrior. The young man asks her not to hold back so much there and confesses that he prefers much more her relaxed way of now. The unexpected comment hits Marie's heart like an arrow, leaving the girl completely red with love. Nina jokes, saying that that was wonderful, but the older sister tells her to shut her mouth from so much embarrassment she feels. The meeting finally reaches its end, and the housekeeper says goodbye to the illustrious visitors, wishing them a safe journey back. The luxurious church carriage starts to move slowly through the streets, leaving the gates of the hero's mansion behind. The housekeeper watches the carriage depart and reflects that normally she wouldn't like to work in such a busy place. She remembers she is serving an extraordinary warrior who managed to leave even the influential Duke confused. The Duke appears in his office, rubbing his head from so much worry for not being able to decipher the legendary hero. With this, the woman promises herself to act with perfection, because she knows she cannot commit the smallest error in front of that man. A knock at the door, and the young man asks the person to enter. The housekeeper enters, warning that both young girls already left, and he thanks her for the notice. The woman notes that the warrior seems exhausted, but thinks it's just a thing in her head. She asks if he used the armor the whole time, and he responds yes, because it was necessary. The housekeeper feels a little confused for not understanding the motives behind that statement. The hero mentions casually that he gave the house keys to the girls to take care of. The woman comments that the youngest was so happy she wouldn't stop opening and closing the door. The warrior laughs, realizing that the girl really still acts like a happy child. The servant tells that the older one spoke very well of him and wishes to return there very soon. He opens a beautiful smile, saying he is happy to hear that, even if it's just flattery. The employee doubts it is a lie because she had never seen the young girl act in that way. She tries to guess if the girl was touched by his words or just relieved. The protagonist shakes his hands nervously, thinking that idea is too absurd. The housekeeper stares at him quite strangely, and he soon asks the motive of that look. The woman changes the subject, complimenting the way the young man handled the great lord easily. It was very difficult not to imagine he could do exactly the same with other people. The young man sighs deeply, wishing he had all that composure the woman imagined. The employee just concludes in silence that casual response was the greatest proof. That day, the warrior used kind words to manage to reassure the Ansage sisters. But at the time of dealing with the Duke, he didn't hesitate to use pitiless and sharp words. Everything the housekeeper can do is pray that he never changes his attitude with her. The employee decides to get used as quickly as possible to the values of her new master. She notices with a certain tension that the warrior really is someone out of the ordinary around there. In the carriage, Marie asks if the sister heard the hero say he likes her natural way. The older one freaks out with joy, saying no guy had ever said something like that. Completely in love, the girl laughs, stating there was no problem with that. Nina stares at the older sister, remembering how she was trembling with fear just before. Marie retorts, remembering that the youngest was until now playing with the door key. Both sisters end up staring at each other intensely, sparks flying from their looks. The older one extends her hand, demanding that the other hand over the key for her to guard. The little one hugs the object against her chest, denying the request with all her strength. The young girl says not to be stubborn because the hero had trusted the key directly to her. Marie sighs deep, warning that the youngest would take the blame if she lost the valuable item. She remembers the smaller one might even seem reliable, but is quite distracted from time to time. The little girl hesitates and starts to tremble, realizing that her older sister had total reason. She hands over the item, and the noble agrees that losing something so precious really wouldn't have any grace. Looking through the window, the girl admits that the man is quite scary for noticing her disguise. She remembers her own father saying it wouldn't be a surprise if the hero noticed the farce. The young girl thanks for following the father's orders, or she would have left a very terrible impression. The noble asks if she gave motives for suspicions, and the youngest ensures she was quite perfect. Nina remembers the young man had very precise information about the new religious group. The little girl starts to suspect that the warrior possesses all the intelligence of the city. She confesses to starting to believe he was the true mysterious informant. The girl joins the dots, remembering that the armored disguise made him even more suspicious. The little one reveals that their father also thinks the same about the young man's furtive strategy. The young girl deduces there must be something bigger happening for him to ask the parents not to come. Marie thinks it impossible for him to know so much without being infiltrated, since he arrived in the city a short while ago. Nina remembers very well that he was acting furtively when he saved her before. The older one refuses the idea because she doubts he would go so far for them, being so occupied. She imagines that if he made so much effort, they should have insisted more with the treasure. Nina states that the Dark Warrior is not the type of person who would accept this type of reward. The older one sighs in love and admits in thoughts that he is incredibly cool. Marie remembers the warrior in armor's beautiful smile and feels her heart beat very fast. The noble says to the youngest that she really was saved by a very kind person. The little one laughs, saying she had already warned that, and the girl confesses that only now she realized. The luxurious church carriage continues, following its path calmly through the city. The young girls finally arrive at the imposing church that is being protected by several soldiers. The older sister looks through the carriage window and wonders what is happening out there. The little girl hugs her own hands and confesses that the sister is starting to scare her. The noble hugs the youngest protectively, ensuring that everything is fine and that she doesn't need to fear. In this, a masked knight mounted on his horse takes a light fright with the approach. The girl pulls the window curtain and starts to talk secretly with the masked knight. She questions discreetly what the current situation is for the soldier on the outside. The guard reports that they managed to resolve the problem of the new group without spreading false rumors. Hearing those good news makes both sisters smile with relief for everything having worked out very well. Already inside the church, their father questions why the daughters returned with the gifts and with keys. The mother of the girls also demonstrates incredulity with the attitude of her older daughter. The young girl understands their frustration because they prepared many things and the problem was resolved. She agrees they should have delivered the best thank you possible to the great warrior. However, the girl clenches her teeth, alleging it would be simply impossible to deal with him. The young girl confesses that the hero saw through her disguise in a short time and broke all the farce. She reveals it is not possible to win in a debate against someone who has everything under the purest control. Both religious leaders are left completely shocked and sweat cold upon hearing that strong report. The father sighs heavily, saying he will have to believe in that if his daughter is affirming it. The noble argues they already foresaw something of the type and that the young man really had everyone in his hands. She questions if the father still wants to force more thanks, even after listening to all the report. The matriarch gives a light smile, confirming that delivering more rewards is still the main plan. The girl notes the father's surprise and tells that the masked hero had already foreseen their actions. The young man stated that her parents shouldn't go because he wouldn't accept any more rewards. The bishop asks, astonished, if he dared say that, and the girl swears by the gods that it is truth. The young girl comments that he ordered the religious leaders to focus on other things more important. The warrior wanted them to use that wasted time to benefit more the great city. The patriarch realizes their family seal is not so useful for the man at the current moment. The mother tries to think positive, believing they will be able to become strong to help him in the future. The leaders are left frightened, and the young girl asks if they understood the terrible refusal now. The noble thinks it's scary how the young man predicted perfectly that those words would convince them. She remembers he demanded ease in that, if they were really prepared to help. The girl smiles in a subtle way, feeling that was exactly the true message of the night. The parents accept that the thank you was not perfect, but understand and compliment the daughter's effort. The youngest raises her finger and warns animatedly that the Dark Warrior also sent a final message. The parents widen their eyes of pure shock when the little one transmits the thanks for the work. A deep and long silence takes over the grand hall of the church after that grand revelation. The little one relates that the knight sent them back home as soon as things were resolved. The parents are left with drops of sweat running, admitting he is someone scarcely reliable. The matriarch turns her face, ensuring that the masked knight is the last person she wants as an enemy. The older sister agrees with everything, believing he must occupy a very high position over there. The little girl changes the subject and asks if they discovered something about the culprit behind everything. The mother confirms she spread the prisoner's information and that the leader must flee the city now. The young girl is confused, questioning the motive for them not trying to capture the great villain right now. Bishop alerts that cornering the enemy would bring the terrible risk of a vengeful attack on the innocent. The bishop explains that completely closing the enemy leader's escape routes would not be the most intelligent decision. Marie crosses her arms, totally bothered, remembering all the malice the criminal had demonstrated. The serene night falls, illuminated by 2 moons in the starry sky. The redhead indignantly asks if his friend didn't have a better, fancier place to eat. The young man in armor replies with a smile that he likes it there, and that fancy places are too expensive. The attendant retorts, reminding him that the boy has plenty of money, and it makes no sense to be cheap. He stares at the customer with an expression of pure exhaustion and disbelief. The knight calmly argues that his friend prefers to spend everything on others. The redhead sighs and recalls that the boy had given him an absurd amount of money earlier. The warrior explains that the amount was just payment for helping him hide. The attendant changes the subject and says he has a serious complaint to make about him. He worriedly reveals that the town thinks he is Jet, Black's personal informant. The protagonist laughs at the situation, while his friend grumbles that it's not funny at all. The informant grows suspicious and asks if this was all just a well-calculated plan of his. The redhead massages the back of his neck, complaining that all this confusion is giving him a stomachache. The hero tries to help and offers a magic remedy that supposedly cures anything. He mentions that it's the same valuable potion he used before to save Nina's life. The attendant freezes on the spot as he processes the gravity of the information. He stammers in shock, asking if it really could cure any injury or illness. The redhead starts to break out in a cold sweat, praying it isn't the legendary item he's imagining. He freaks out, saying it would be crazy to use a universal elixir just for a tummy ache. The boy is confused, not understanding why his friend was complaining instead of thanking him. The informant murmurs in terror that the knight's actions deeply frighten him. He continues to shout indignantly about the fact that his friend is walking around with something so valuable. The hero ignores the outburst and calmly announces he has one more little thing to give him. He places a giant bag on the table containing over 2 million in cash. The attendant backs away in fear, stating he can't accept such an absurd amount. The warrior insists with his eyes closed that this is the proper way to settle his debt. He asks in a threatening manner what would happen if his friend refused the offer. The redhead goes into a full-blown panic from the pressure and the boy's intimidating smile. He desperately hugs the bag of coins, saying he accepts out of fear of the consequences. The informant clutches the fortune to his chest, still trying to process what just happened. The knight sips his drink calmly, while his friend gets his attention again. The redhead worriedly tells him to be careful walking around carrying so much cash. The hero just blinks in confusion, seeing no problem with the situation. The attendant realizes that his friend would simply beat up anyone who tried to rob him. The boy continues to look puzzled, not understanding the informant's reasoning. The armored protagonist finally says goodbye, waving as he leaves the tavern. The redhead thoughtfully observes the bag of money shining on the back of the shelf. He panics and tries to hide the fortune when a female employee suddenly appears. Far away, the story reveals that the Holy Church was built by the Ansage family. Their relentless power ended up crushing and replacing the beliefs of the ancestors. To weaken the church, a mutually beneficial deal was made with the Red Freed. The scene shifts to a dark cave, lit only by torches mounted on the wall. A blonde man indignantly asks how their plan failed, even with the information. The woman in the cloak reveals nervously that everything was leaked and they walked into a trap. The gray-haired man concludes bitterly that they were completely deceived and robbed. He laments the worst-case scenario and questions where they went wrong in their planning. The woman explains that the rival family had help from a feared agent named Jet Black. The gray-haired man is shocked to realize it's the same guy who had already ruined the syndicate. The woman reveals that the Red Freed gave him the information in hopes of getting revenge. The blonde leader concludes that if they were lured into a trap, someone leaked their plan. The girl questions if the leader is suggesting there's a spy for Jet Black among them. The gray-haired man interrupts irritably, stating that this paranoia is going too far. The woman agrees, reminding them that they all united to crush a common enemy. The blonde man retorts that stirring up the group like that makes her suspicious. The gray-haired man claps his hands loudly, getting everyone's attention in the cave. He calls for calm and warns them not to let Jet Black turn them against each other. The woman suggests that the one to blame for the failure is the informant connected to the hero. She recounts a rumor that the owner of a tavern called LD's works with him. An image of the redhead appears as she reveals that he even receives gifts from the hero. The girl concludes that the informant passed everything to the Ansages so they could set the trap. The gray-haired man listens to the theory in silence, seeming to agree with the new idea. The woman reveals that the Red Freed made one last request before they left the city. The request was to attack someone close to Jet Black to divide the Knight's focus. In return, the Syndicate would help them destroy the Ansage family in the future. A wicked smile forms on the gray-haired man's face as he imagines the perfect revenge. He admits the group has no chance of defeating Jet Black himself, but he smiles confidently, stating that attacking a simple tavern owner would be very easy. The woman hesitates with a bad feeling and suggests they just escape to safety. The blonde man laughs, assuring her that causing a little trouble at night won't hurt. The girl agrees, filled with rage at seeing a years-long plan completely ruined. She clenches her fists and declares with determination that they must proceed with the attack. The gray-haired man adjusts his mask, focused on the valuable alliance promised by the Red Freed. Everyone puts on their masks, confident that the Syndicate will do the heavy lifting. The leader announces they've rested enough and orders the group to get moving. Meanwhile, Jet Black walks calmly through the deserted city streets at night. He wonders in frustration what on earth is happening with all this confusion. The protagonist remembers his friend's worried warning about walking around with a lot of money. The hero tenses up, imagining the redhead might have meant someone is after him. He walks hastily, lamenting that if he had known, he wouldn't be out on the street at this hour. The boy grumbles indignantly that the informant could have warned him about the risks. He cautiously enters a dark alley, trying to take a shortcut through the city. The warrior sighs, thinking he should have stayed at the tavern for safety. He tries to calm himself down, laughing nervously, and thinking he wouldn't be attacked that easily. But in that same instant, he quickly draws his sword upon sensing a nearby presence. The hero spins his blade, releasing a powerful wave of blue energy down the dark street. He realizes that anyone who saw him like that would call the authorities, but he concludes that his appearance would intimidate any bandit who tried to rob him. He continues his nightly patrol, leaping over the city walls with great ease. Suddenly, he stops, noticing something strange moving in the nearby shadows. The knight in armor blocks the path, facing the group of hooded figures. The gray-haired leader freezes in terror upon coming face to face with the feared warrior. The entire group backs away in panic, realizing the worst possible person has found them. The gray-haired man breaks out in a cold sweat and stammers Jet Black's name, completely paralyzed by fear. The hero tenses up, thinking these guys are after his money right now. He decides to act quickly to scare off the criminals and avoid an unnecessary fight. The knight summons his sword and pretends to already know about their ill intentions to rob him. He taunts the group, saying that 4 against 1 is underestimating him a bit too much. The gray-haired leader grinds his teeth in fury, telling the hero to stop looking down on them. He shouts with hatred, claiming their perfect plan was ruined because of him. The protagonist tries to explain the misunderstanding, but the blonde man tells him to shut up. The gray-haired leader apologizes to his group and tells the 3 of them to run while he buys time. The group refuses to flee and readies their weapons, determined to fight to the bitter end. The woman states that there is no other way out but to try and defeat the feared Dark Knight. The hero starts to break out in a cold sweat, completely terrified by the criminal's deadly determination. He raises his hand defensively and pleads for them to talk about the misunderstanding. The gray-haired man shouts furiously, accusing the boy of drawing his weapon first to start the fight. The protagonist realizes the group will advance no matter what and concludes he has no choice. He swallows hard and decides he will have to act exactly as he did in the game. The warrior prepares his combat stance as his blade begins to glow intensely. The group's leader shouts for everyone to prepare to receive the enemy's attack. The woman quickly invokes a defensive magic, while the other henchman draws his sword. The blonde man casts magical enhancement and physical improvement spells, bracing for impact. The gray-haired man also strengthens his own body, becoming enveloped in a red magical aura. The protagonist watches the nostalgic scene, remembering the game but feeling a suffocating tension. The boy continues to hold the strike as the glow of his sword grows brighter and brighter. He asks one last time if they really won't listen to him while his skill charges. The leader tells him to stop the act and warns him not to blame them for what happens next. The entire group charges at once against the knight, who is startled by their speed. The criminals finally reach their target as the skill's timer runs out. The warrior unleashes a devastating blast of blue energy that tears through everything in its path. The insane attack lands a direct hit on the aggressors, who can't even react. The girl is completely shocked, not understanding what just hit them. The explosion engulfs the entire group and sweeps across the stone bridge with a devastating impact. The magic staff flies away as the woman is violently thrown by the blow. All four criminals are launched into the air simultaneously by the massive shock wave. They plummet from the destroyed bridge and fall straight into the water, sending up huge jets. The boy panics, realizing he overdid it with the attack's strength. Some residents rush out from nearby streets, startled by the sudden boom. The hero observes the wreckage as civilians gather, shocked by the destruction. He freezes and nervously peeks over his shoulder, fearing the consequences. Below the bridge, the criminal group groans in pain in the shallow water, completely defeated. The protagonist lets out a long, tired sigh under the light of the moon. He faces the guards in residence, muttering internally that it wasn't his fault. The scene moves to the next morning, showing the city's quiet clock tower. A newspaper reports rumors that Jet Black shattered the bridge with a single blow. The article also reveals the captured group's ties to the infamous Red Freed organization. The guards leading the prisoners listen to their confessions, completely perplexed. The incident spreads through the city, warning that Jet Black should never be provoked. The scene shifts to the palace, where a small nun smiles excitedly at the news about the hero. Another nun praises how he manages to accomplish absurd things and capture criminals. The younger one innocently asks if the knight will pay for all the bridge repairs. The head nun smiles calmly, stating that he was just defending himself from the attack. The apprentices agree, imagining the warrior would have handled everything cleanly. The room falls silent as the head nun pauses to reflect on the events. The blindfolded woman comments, in a more serious tone, that the situation seems to have been intentional. She reveals her deduction and suggests the enemy leader also had ties to the Red Freed. The nun believes the knight fought seriously to send a lethal warning to the group. The hero is imagined as a menacing shadow, demanding they never try anything like that again. The narrative points out that the Red Freed used the group to try to take down the Ansage family, but the syndicate's power and structure were completely shattered by the boy's strength. The nun praises the warrior's incredible actions, while her friend says she's getting too excited. The young woman laments not asking if he had a girlfriend, and the other tells her not to steal her hero. The suspicious nun points out that the church's spare key keeps disappearing and accuses Nina of stealing it. The head nun approaches from behind and advises the young woman to be completely honest about the situation. Nina nervously confesses she only takes the key to sleep, hugging it out of pure admiration. The two burst out laughing, admitting they are both completely crazy and fascinated by the Dark Knight. The leader smiles gently as she also loses focus, thinking about the incredible warrior's actions. A large tray full of fresh bread and croissants shines under the warm daylight. Jet Black distributes the food to the townspeople, peacefully helping those most in need. The story moves to the afternoon of the next day, showing the sunlit window of the hero's mansion. The housekeeper serves an elegant tea and comments that his actions were scandalous and merciless. The protagonist tries to justify himself, saying that all that destruction was never his real intention. He cries comically, admitting admitting he was completely shocked by his own excessive strength. The boy recovers and thanks the housekeeper for resolving all the problems with the city. She suggests he destroyed a secondary road on purpose just to test her skills. The knight desperately denies it and decides to change the subject by asking his helper a sincere question. He asks her to evaluate his performance and point out if he made any mistakes or fell short. The hero smiles in relief when she says everything was perfect since she didn't have to get him out of his room. The maid places a hand on her chest and thanks him, saying that it gives her great peace of mind. She asks if she should continue to deal with the city as his official representative from now on. The boy thinks tensely that he had no idea that group was involved with the dangerous criminal cult. Jet Black interrupts his thoughts and tells the housekeeper he has an important matter pending. He asks apprehensively about the destroyed bridge, wanting to know who would pay for the repair costs. The protagonist confesses he couldn't sleep, and she reassures him, saying he won't pay for anything. The warrior is in complete disbelief and asks if she's telling the truth about the debt waiver. The employee explains that she framed the destruction as an unavoidable use of force to capture enemies. The narrative shows the housekeeper faced a lot of resistance and complaints from the city authorities. The officials accuse the hero of using excessive force to capture such a small group of people. The maid scared everyone by asking in a threatening tone if they were calling Jet Black a liar. The knight comments nervously that it sounds like intimidation, and the employee assures him it was just a question. He insists she clearly threatened the court, but prefers to agree to not prolong the discussion. The housekeeper sighs proudly and assures him the case is closed and he won't be bothered anymore. She says the church and the city will cover the costs, but asks him to report any questioning. The boy looks away, feeling like he's just incurred a disguised debt with the region's powerful figures. He shakes his head frantically, trying to convince himself it's just his imagination. The hero approaches the window and asks in surprise if the workers have already started the bridge repairs. The helper confirms and says that the use of heavy magic ensures the structure will be ready the next day. Jet Black announces he's going out to make a delivery, and she immediately offers to send a servant in his place. The protagonist refuses, stating he prefers to handle things himself instead of depending on others. The employee smiles, saying that's just like him, and questions him about the huge battle armor. She looks at him, confused, as she tries to process her mysterious master's eccentric logic. The housekeeper sighs in defeat and just asks him to be very careful while he's out on the street. The knight gives a gentle smile and thanks her immensely for all her impeccable support. The young maid blushes violently, completely melted by her master's charm and politeness. On the city streets, people begin to murmur and whisper as soon as they notice the figure passing by. Jet Black walks through the market wearing his dark armor, drawing the attention of all the residents. The boy hunches his shoulders, breaking into a cold sweat and feeling like all those curious stares are hurting. The warrior reveals he only put on the heavy suit as a precaution in case he was ambushed. The hero desperately realizes that to the public, he just looks like a proud destroyer on parade. He weeps internally, wishing the housekeeper had been clear about not wearing the armor in the street. He apologizes internally, remembering that the bridge's destruction was just an accident with his sharp blade. The boy cries internally, realizing everyone in the city must think he's just showing off. The hero begs himself not to draw any more attention as he passes a man with a dark look. He takes a deep breath, trying to calm down to focus on what he really needs to do. He concludes he needs to buy the most expensive sweets possible to clear his image with these people. The warrior arrives excitedly at the bakery, ending up startling one of the employees at the door. He opens the door of the fancy establishment, stammering nervously as he enters. One of the attendants at the shop hurriedly asks him to wait a moment. The girl rushes past him while the knight in armor just nods in confusion. The protagonist cries on the inside, certain that the store manager already knows about the bridge incident. The hero waits alone and patiently in the middle of the beautiful, sunlit bakery. The manager arrives, thanking him for his visit. While the hero thinks she's afraid he'll destroy the shop too. The boy breaks out in a cold sweat, concluding he has definitely become a marked figure in the entire city. The woman smiles very forcedly and asks, in a friendly manner, what brings the famous warrior here today. He asks for 5 of the best suites, and the manager insists on taking him to a VIP room in the back. The hero tries to refuse the excessive kindness, stating he doesn't mind waiting at the counter. The manager rejects the idea, bowing deeply and begging him to accept the VIP invitation. He finally gives in and accepts the invitation, completely amazed by the fancy shop's impeccable service. The woman flashes a smile of deep relief and guides the dark warrior through the bakery's corridors. She gestures gracefully, pointing to a very luxurious wooden door. The knight calmly steps forward and opens the golden handle to enter the private room. The boy excuses himself as he steps into the ridiculously spacious and very luxurious environment. The warrior is stunned by the incredible place, while the woman asks him to sit down and make himself comfortable. The hero observes the refined setting with absolute certainty that this place was only for the elite. The manager offers some complimentary drinks and snacks, but the humble knight politely declines. He decides to get the woman's attention, feeling that this whole atmosphere seemed like a huge exaggeration. The boy questions if he could really be there, as it seemed to be a members-only area. The woman explains with a smile that Lord Banlord himself sent an official directive to all the shops. The rule was extremely clear, demanding that the hero always receive the best possible treatment. The protagonist is completely confused, as he had no idea who this lord from the organization was. He soon deduces that it was all just a tactic to prevent him from destroying the shop by mistake. The manager continues her explanation, revealing that the main order included a very specific second step. The boy panics upon discovering that she was supposed to notify the big shot the moment he arrived. She assumes the boss or someone high-ranking wants to meet him since his house was very close. The knight starts to sweat, in complete disbelief at the frightening turn this simple outing has taken. The hero desperately begs her to hurry up with the order, promising a good tip for her haste. The manager says amicably that she'll do her best, but confirming the items would take some time. He trembles with dread, concluding the woman was just stalling to give the big shot time to arrive. The door is violently busted open, startling the manager while the hero braces for the worst-case scenario. A small hand points in his direction, leaving the dangerous dark warrior completely confused. An adorable little blonde girl bursts into the VIP room, excitedly shouting that little Remy has finally arrived. The child runs at full speed with her arms open, showing absurd happiness to see the knight. The girl throws herself against the heavy armor, giving the giant, dark warrior a tight hug. The employees panic from the shock while the hero discovers that the girl received his message. The protagonist stares at the adorable child, trying to figure out if she was one of the big shot's contacts. The little girl smiles, innocently revealing that her father was the big boss of the huge commerce organization. The girl rubs her little face against the armor, giggling, while the hero breaks into a cold sweat at the revelation. The manager observes the whole adorable interaction with a very gentle smile on her face. The little girl lets go of the warrior and blinks in confusion, trying to understand the big guy's tension and nervousness. The protagonist cries internally, realizing the danger, and asks with extreme care where her parents were. The girl asks to be called just Remy and says the knight has special permission to do so. The hero despairs, knowing that if they find out he's a regular guy, he could end up getting taken out. He regains his composure and calmly asks where little Remy's parents were. The girl answers that she doesn't know, and the manager realizes with horror that the girl got the message alone. Remy innocently asks if her actions impress him, and the warrior reacts with surprise to the question. The child insists on knowing if he found it all impressive, and the hero replies that he simply doesn't know. She closes her eyes confidently and declares that she'll decide then that he found her very impressive. The armored knight sighs warily, but admits with relief that the little girl seems to be doing very well. Remy smiles, all proud and happy to be receiving the feared warrior's attention and praise. The boy watches her sitting in the armchair and thinks calmly that using the healing potion was really worth it. He smiles under his helmet, satisfied to see that the adorable child has fully recovered. The hero politely asks the manager and the employees to step back a bit and move away from them. The woman apologizes for the interruption and hands over the order, stating the absurd price of the bill. The manager smiles gently and offers the order as a gift to apologize for the time they took from him. He thanks her for the courtesy, but breaks into a cold sweat thinking about the absurd price of those fine sweets. Little Remy asks with confusion if he really liked eating treats that much. The knight denies it, saying it's a delivery for the workers, and that it was a very long story. The little girl deduces it's because of the bridge, and he insists, saying the structure broke on its own. The warrior holds the luxurious bag and apologizes before starting to get up from the armchair. The girl informs the manager that she will pay the bill and asks for it to be charged at the end of the month. The hero immediately refuses the offer and nervously insists that he will make a point of paying for the purchase. He grumbles that he doesn't want to owe favors to anyone for something he can handle himself. The manager places a hand on her chest and politely agrees with the sweet girl's proposal. The protagonist admires how the merchant family handles business and all this influence so well. He mentally praises how Remy manipulates the whole situation better than the other girls. The warrior looks at the child and comments in surprise that she acts very mature for her age. Remy proudly explains that she learned from her father to always accumulate as many favors as possible. The hero breaks into a cold sweat and nervously suggests she not repeat that questionable lesson to anyone else. The knight asks if the manager wouldn't accept the money at all, and she apologizes profusely. He sighs in defeat, realizing that trying to argue with the two of them would be a huge waste of time. The girl asks where he's going, and the hero patiently replies that he's going to deliver the sweets. Remy grabs the warrior's black cape and determinedly decides she will accompany the delivery too. The hero gets worried, fearing that walking alongside the boss's daughter will spark even bigger rumors. He tries to convince her that she doesn't need to come with him for such a simple task. The boy is shocked and his eyes widen when she replies that she is hiring him for protection. He understands the lack of guards and concludes with fear that she sent her own carriage away by herself. The knight refuses the proposal, arguing nervously that he might not even be able to protect her if something happens. The girl gets even closer and asks sweetly if she's being impressive now. The hero ends up giving in to the charming request, noting that this child could get plenty of favors. He cries internally, admitting that her ability to manipulate was truly impressive. The two walk out together, hand in hand, while little Remy giggles happily. The warrior laments his own luck, trying to understand how he always ends up in these situations. The manager kindly asks Remy to send her best regards to Director Banlard. The woman smiles and sincerely hopes that Jet Black will continue to honor the shop in the future. The knight agrees while breaking into a cold sweat, considering bringing sweets for the nuns if he gets another chance. The manager watches them leave and lets out a long sigh of relief with her hand on her chest. The hero walks alongside the little blonde girl as they leave the fancy establishment under the sunlight. The girl suddenly stops with a more serious expression on her face as she stares at the huge armor. The hero senses the strange mood while calmly holding the bag full of expensive sweets. The warrior looks back, very surprised to hear an annoyed voice calling him from the middle of the street. The little girl starts to stare at the hero with an annoyed expression. The knight notices the deadly glare and asks if there was something wrong with her. The child suddenly extends her tiny hand towards the feared warrior. She looks away, blushing, and says she will allow him to hold her hand. The protagonist is very confused, not understanding why she seemed offended. He wonders why she was acting as if she were doing him a favor. The warrior concludes that holding hands is a good way to not lose her in the crowd. He breaks into a cold sweat, imagining he would be held responsible if something bad happened. The knight warns that if she got lost, it would be entirely her fault. The hero freaks out, thinking the girl was threatening him just to hold hands. Remy glares at him intimidatingly and asks if he had a problem with it. He denies it and thinks it was actually a great idea, coming from someone he was supposed to protect. The armored warrior just lets out a long sigh, defeated by her stubbornness. He holds out his large iron hand and tells the little girl to just grab it already. The little girl holds his hand firmly, feeling the texture of the cold gauntlet. She complains about the armor's hardness, and he explains that if it were soft, it wouldn't protect anything. Remy says holding it like that seemed painful and suggests just holding onto his arm instead. The child affectionately holds the giant, feared dark warrior's armored fingers. He threatens to let go of her hand and asks if she thought the risk of getting lost was a good idea. The girl changes her mind in an instant and hugs his arm in a very cute way. Remy proudly explains that she just thought it over and decided to reach a reasonable agreement. The little girl says her father always taught her about the importance of compromising in business. The merchant would say that whenever she remembered that lesson, things would flow much better. The hero praises the teachings while remembering that the girl used to be very sickly. She comments that she used to read a lot to pass the time since she could do it in bed. The protagonist feels a slight pang in his heart upon hearing the child's innocent account. He remembers how she used to just lie there, almost unable to move. The warrior smiles under his helmet, feeling a genuine happiness to see her well. He laments the fact that the little girl spent most of her life unable to play freely. The hero gives her a lecture, telling her to keep studying because it was something she wouldn't regret. Remy makes a bored face and complains, saying she actually just wanted to play every day. The knight advises her to finish her obligations first, and she grumbles that everyone says the same thing. The warrior sighs and explains that it means everyone cares a lot about her. He smiles understandingly, figuring the girl must be tired of hearing the same lectures. Jet Black deduces that spending the whole day on the street must be exhausting for someone not used to it. The hero comments that he already felt tired, and the little girl is shocked by the revelation. He notices her despair and asks if she thought they would take a carriage to the location. The child confesses, muttering that she really had hoped not to have to walk the whole way. The warrior apologizes desperately, explaining he almost never took a carriage through the city. He suggests they rent a ride while she still has energy, but she tries to act tough. The adorable girl refuses and says that if she gets tired, he could carry her on his back. The hero insists the carriage was a better idea, but the little girl pouts, demanding to be carried. He decides to keep an eye on her so he doesn't realize too late that she needs a rest. In that same instant, the little girl fakes being tired and says she can't take another step. The knight gets annoyed, realizing the act, and warns that he shouldn't spoil her so much. Remy gives a mischievous little smile and admits she can still walk a little more. The protagonist watches her walk cheerfully, wondering if she wasn't upset with him. The narrative comically reveals that she ended up being carried long before they reached the bridge. The construction workers panic when they see the figure of the destroyer approaching with the girl. The city's mages work hard, quickly restoring the huge stone bridge structure. The project manager watches in shock, wondering what kind of bizarre combination that was. She nervously reflects on the bridge's destroyer being accompanied by the daughter of one of the big shots. The assistant worriedly deduces that the two were there to conduct a surprise inspection of the site. The mage goes into a total panic at the idea of an inspection, and the assistant desperately tries to calm her down. She grabs him desperately, reminding him it was impossible for them to cut corners on this. The woman grumbles that her renowned company could be kicked out if they angered the visitors. The image highlights the power of the magic clock, as she decrees they can't slack off on the job. The mage breaks into a cold sweat and concludes she has no choice but to go and greet them. She trembles with fear, feeling that dealing with that pair was like holding a ticking bomb. The leader changes her posture and orders at the top of her lungs for everyone to start using maximum mana infusion. The assistant is startled by the sudden order and warns that this was not the plan. He nervously explains that this way, the company would lose money and that they were short-staffed. The woman ignores the risks and decrees they would all just push through while she arranged for potions. The magic infusion technique is detailed, revealing that it covers the entire structure with energy. However, using this powerful magic has the huge disadvantage of consuming a lot of the workers' mana. The mage straightens her posture, blindly believing that pleasing the visitors was the only way out. She tries to motivate the employee by promising a big bonus and a party if they survive. The young man swallows hard, realizing the gravity of the situation and the risks they were in. He lets out a defeated sigh and finally agrees to pass on the boss's extreme orders. The mage leaves the room and opens the door with such force that it ends up hitting the young man right in the head. The assistant ignores the pain and starts shouting desperately, getting the attention of all the builders. He stammers out the order for the workers to gather around, while the leader watches the scene anxiously. The exhausted workers shout in indignation upon hearing the absurd new work demands. Despair soon takes over as they are forced to infuse magic directly into the stones. The leader sighs tensely and mutters that she also felt like crying about the whole situation. She analyzes Remy from afar, concluding that the adorable child seemed to be the less dangerous part. But the terror returns to Jet, Black in the rumors that he oppressed even the highest authorities. The mage swallows hard, feeling that the knight's dark energy was much worse than before. She wonders paranoidly if the warrior was carrying some magic item that amplified his power. The leader, sweating coldly, decides to focus all her attention on the child to survive the visit. She puffs out her chest, remembering that she is the main manager responsible for Melandum's trust. The woman swallows her fear and finally opens the site door, coming face to face with the dark giant. She bows politely and states it's an honor to meet the feared hero and little Remy. The knight returns the greeting reservedly while the little girl just says a very cheerful hi. The mage formally introduces herself as Aliva, highlighting her position as chief director of the project. The warrior thanks her for the reception in an extremely dry and very direct way, without prolonging his speech. Aliva freaks out internally, startled by his cold attitude, thinking he was flaunting his power. She thanks the heavens that Remy was there, serving as an adorable little shield. The director smiles forcedly and asks, with the utmost politeness, what brought them to the bridge. She thinks tensely that a threatening big shot would never reveal his true intentions right away. Jet, Black is startled by the formality and nervously explains he just wanted to drop off a quick gift. He hands over the bags and apologizes for the huge problem he caused everyone with the bridge. The mage's eyes widen in complete wonder as she thanks the hero for his consideration, but her paranoid side strikes again, trying to figure out the meaning behind the gift. She is shocked when she recognizes the brand and realizes they're the most expensive sweets on the market. Aliva calculates the value and almost has a heart attack when she notices the hero brought hundreds of thousands worth. The warrior says a quick goodbye, apologizing for interrupting their work, and leaves. The director freezes on the spot, not believing the absurd speed of this supposed inspection. She wonders indignantly how someone could do a proper evaluation of everything in such a short time. Aliva screams in despair, realizing too late that the orders for maximum infusion were a huge mistake. Aliva panics, holding her head as she realizes none of this was in her plans. She reflects that if the nobles found out about the pause in mana infusion, the company would lose everything. The mage breaks into a cold sweat and wonders in terror if this was Jet, Black's plan from the beginning. She thinks about the luxurious gift that ended up forcing the company to spend millions more on the construction. Aliva laments the fact that they handed a negotiation victory to someone they owed nothing to. She admires the genius mind capable of manipulating someone without even knowing their personality. The director swears to herself that she must retaliate against this attack out of sheer pride. Aliva runs desperately towards the exit and shouts for little Remy to wait. The armored knight stops walking and looks back, surprised by the sudden call. The hero turns his head in confusion, not understanding what the site leader could possibly want with them now. Oliva runs over in desperation, asking little Remy to wait a moment while she hugs the armored knight. The little girl stays wrapped around the hero, who feels quite awkward given the unusual situation. Oliva explains that to fix the bridge, they will need to maintain a mana infusion for many hours straight, and that means they will need a massive supply of prepared recovery potions. The woman realizes that the perfect person to supply all of that is standing right before her eyes. She apologizes for the trouble and says she would like to ask a very important favor of Remy's father. The little girl agrees to the request, even without fully understanding what is going on. Oliva asks for 10 large mana potions and 50 medium ones to be delivered directly to the site. Remy accepts without any issues, and Oliva sighs in relief, saying that this will be a huge help for them. Oliva is impressed by the girl's power, as she accepted the deal as if it were something super simple. She remembers that Remy is the daughter of one of the greatest and most influential merchants in the entire region. The director starts to get annoyed, wondering if the hero planned all of this to pressure her into closing the deal. But she gets a shock when the girl charges more than 4 million coins for the full service, including transportation. Oliva cries in desperation, realizing that all that money will have to come out of her own pocket. Remy even offers a payment deadline, while the warrior is shocked by the absurd total. She explains that mana potions are extremely expensive and cost a small fortune each. Furthermore, the urgent transport of such fragile items makes the final service even more costly. Oliva realizes that the little girl truly inherited all of her father's business talent. Remy warns that there will be consequences if the deadline is not met, leaving the director terrified. The woman starts to wonder if the feared hero had already planned to leave her in that difficult position. The knight praises the girl for the big contract, but she reveals she didn't know the potions were for that. He is confused by the comment, but the little girl decides to change the subject and asks him to forget about it. The blonde girl begins to deduce the true intentions behind that valuable gift from the hero. Meanwhile, Oliva becomes furious when she looks at the sweets, realizing she was completely deceived by him. She feels her pride was wounded and that she cannot simply accept having been played for a fool. The woman then decides there is still something she can do to get back at the warrior. She invites the hero to personally test the strength of the stone that received the mana infusion. He is a bit reluctant, but Oliva insists, saying that the test will only take a few minutes. Remy says she wants to see the test too, and the director celebrates having gained the girl's support. Oliva takes the opportunity to pressure the warrior into accepting the challenge once and for all. With no way out, he ends up accepting the invitation, provided that it truly won't cause any problems. The woman celebrates internally for having managed to lead the warrior exactly where she wanted. The day remains beautiful and sunny as the group prepares to perform the great strength test. He asks how he should perform the test, and she tells him to just give it a light tap with his own weapon. Oliva thinks that even he won't be able to break the mana, strengthened stone, which is now as hard as iron. The hero is worried, thinking that a simple tap of his sword might end up cutting the block in half. She laughs at his concern and guarantees that the stone is so resistant it won't suffer even a scratch. He is surprised by all that confidence and prepares himself while the director starts to organize the area. She prepares the test block, determined to corner the armored knight. The woman begins to channel her bright purple magic to further strengthen the test structure. The stone blocks begin to glow intensely as they are completely enveloped by the magical power. She gives a victorious smile, thinking silently that he shouldn't hold any grudges for what is about to happen. Oliva points out where the warrior should strike, while the workers celebrate the arrival of the sweets in the background. The men are amazed to see the fine sweets sent by the feared bridge destroyer. The director imagines the perfect marketing she will have if she manages to prove that not even the hero could break the stone. She can already see her company's reputation and recognition soaring to the heights with the feat. With the business success, she will finally be able to provide a nice raise and improve her team's benefits. The warrior asks the little girl to step back for safety, while the director says he can start now. She advises the hero to slide the blade very carefully to ensure it doesn't end up sustaining damage. But as he pulls his sword out, a terrifying and bright blue energy begins to completely envelop the weapon. The hero agrees with the director's instructions and prepares to give a very light tap on the stone. He decides to make a quick attempt and wields his glowing sword toward the magic block. The tip of the shining sword touches the surface of the strengthened rock lightly, emitting a small glow. He lets out a sigh of relief after making the subtle move, believing that everything went well in the end. Director Aleva gives a very confident smile, believing her stone resisted the test perfectly. The armored warrior puts his weapon back into its sheath with total calmness. The blade fits perfectly into the metal holder, while silence takes over the location. Little Remy suddenly widens her eyes, extremely surprised by what she just saw before her. The huge stone block simply divides in half with a perfect and extremely clean cut. The protagonist starts to sweat nervously, realizing the damage he caused unintentionally. Oliva is left completely paralyzed in shock with wide eyes, unable to believe it. The director panics completely, wondering if that is real or just an illusion before her. Remy stares at the scene with a very serious look and questions if they weren't overestimating the stone. The woman starts waving her hands in desperation, trying to explain that it was all just a misunderstanding. She explains nervously that Mani infusion technique usually leaves the stone as hard as iron. Oliva fears that the warrior will leave with a terrible impression of the quality of her work. She realizes in shock that he destroyed everything just by drawing his blade without using any reinforcement magic. The woman tries to justify herself, saying that the knight's feat was something totally out of the ordinary. She becomes even more tense, seeing that Remy is distracted and doesn't seem to believe her words. Oliva joins her hands and begs the warrior not to draw hasty conclusions about the test. The woman panics upon remembering she had guaranteed the block wouldn't suffer even a scratch. She asks nervously if the knight at least felt the block was firmer than a common stone. The director insists desperately, trying to get a positive confirmation from the feared warrior. The hero replies calmly that, in truth, he couldn't notice any difference in resistance at all. The woman descends into absolute despair upon hearing the armored hero's honest answer. Remy has a very serious expression, leaving director Oliva on the verge of a nervous breakdown. The reputation and trust of her trading company are about to collapse because of the test. Tense silence dominates the area while Oliva continues sweating cold, waiting for the worst. The warrior calls little Remy's attention, and she turns to him with an unfriendly face. He tries to calm the situation by explaining that judging something from afar is different from testing it yourself. The girl listens closely to the words of the warrior, who tries to change her perspective. The hero picks up a common stone from the ground with his armored hand to perform a practical demonstration. The little girl nods, showing that she is beginning to understand his line of reasoning. He hands a smaller stone to Remy and asks her to strike it against another, larger stone he is holding. Remy holds the rock firmly and prepares to strike with great determination. She bangs the two rocks together with force, making a dry sound while the hero watches intently. The warrior asks if she really put force into the hit, and the girl confirms that she did. He praises her effort, pointing out that the larger rock ended up suffering a small crack. The girl is surprised to see that even her light force was capable of leaving a visible mark. The knight kneels humbly before Oliva, leaving the director surprised. He politely asks the director to use her mana infusion on that same cracked rock. Oliva accepts the request gladly and begins to channel her purple magic into the small piece of rock. She finishes the process quickly and hands the glowing stone back to the warrior. The knight tells Remy to repeat the previous hit, using even more force than before. Remy bangs the rocks with all her might, letting out an excited shout and putting all her energy into the strike. The hero shows that this time the strengthened rock suffered absolutely no damage at all. He reinforces the lesson about testing things for oneself, and Remy says she learned a lot today. Remy bows, apologizing for having doubted, while Oliva goes into despair at the gesture. The hero praises the little girl's gesture, saying that admitting one's own mistakes is a valuable virtue. Remy offers her head for a head pat, but the warrior prefers to avoid it to not draw attention. Oliva thinks to herself that she would like to support the little girl in any way she can. The knight comments with a laugh that things seem to be quite difficult for both sides lately. The woman is a bit embarrassed by the friendly comment and thanks the hero shyly. She wonders if the warrior truly sympathizes with the difficulty of dealing with influential people. The knight thanks her for the support and says he is counting on her help to manage the work from then on. He then decides to say goodbye and warns little Remy that it is time for them to head home. Oliva realizes that instead of being taken advantage of, she ended up gaining a strong ally she can trust. She flops to the ground in relief, thinking that, in the end, that was a cheap lesson to learn. As they walk under the sunset, the blonde girl asks if he doesn't want to come into her house for a visit. The hero politely refuses because he doesn't want to face the powerful and intimidating leader of the trading guild. Remy insists, asking why, and promises that everyone would give him an amazing reception with lots of sweets. He thanks her for the invitation, but reminds her that she still needs to tell her parents about the work she did. The girl pouts, upset, while he imagines how complicated it would be to deal with her parents right now. The knight explains that this isn't the right moment for him to appear, and decides to leave her near the entrance. He makes up an excuse about having other tasks and realizes that lying only made things more awkward. Remy asks if he is very busy with that secret agent work she heard about. The girl says with a curious look that she decided to ask precisely because he had asked them not to do that. He becomes tense with her curiosity and changes the subject, saying that all work is difficult in one way or another. The girl offers to get several magical and rare items with her father's help to make his life easier. The hero refuses, saying he can get everything he needs on his own, leaving the blonde girl even more amazed. She remembers a teaching from her father about humility and says that one day her own family will be the strongest. Remy gestures excitedly, saying she wants to build a strong home where people can seek help in the future. She snuggles onto the warrior's back, happy to have been saved by him and to have finally found a dream. The little one swears she will get stronger to be able to get those potions and help everyone in danger. The protagonist is very proud of the little girl's determination and praises her noble life goal. He wishes from the bottom of his heart that sweet Remy manages to keep that purity of feelings forever. The knight then invites the girl to visit his house next time to receive a special gift. Remy celebrates very excitedly, but he explains that today isn't possible because he still has some important tasks. She pouts and asks what the mysterious gift is, but the warrior prefers to keep it a secret for now. Remy decides she will visit him the very next day, and the hero accepts, saying he has no plans for tomorrow. The girl shouts with joy, hugging his neck while he suggests they go home soon to rest. The armored knight finally says goodbye to the little girl with a wave while she runs back joyfully. Remy opens the doors of her huge mansion, running in and announcing to the four winds that she is home. Her father and older sister stare at the girl with expressions that mix relief and much worry. The father lets out a tired sigh and asks if she has nothing more important to say after disappearing. Suddenly, the older sister gives Remy a knock on the head, scolding the little girl for her attitude. The little one cries, indignant at the aggression, and asks her father to scold the older sister really hard. The father says she deserved the scolding and gives a lecture on the importance of always being accompanied by guards. The sister agrees with the lecture, but decides to let it slide since the little one returned safe and sound. The man then asks the reason why the legendary knight didn't come inside the family mansion with her. Remy explains that he had obligations with the secret organization, but her father is shocked to hear the name. Both the father and the sister shout, startled, asking if the warrior really said those words. Remy covers her ears, irritated by the shouting, and explains that he didn't use that exact secret term. The little girl says she deduced it herself from the mysterious phrases the knight used on the way back. The father agrees thoughtfully, saying that that kind of authority could only come from someone high-ranking. The girl praises her father's deduction and takes the opportunity to reveal the big potion contract she secured. The man is confused to learn that the mana potions are going to the bridge project they themselves are paying for. He tries to put the puzzle pieces together and realizes how that whole situation with the project unfolded. The older sister watches everything with a very focused look, agreeing with her father's conclusion. The patriarch concludes with surprise that the legendary hero truly operates in terrifying and brilliant ways. The merchant walks resolutely toward his dark wood desk in the office. He places his hand on a glowing blue communication crystal to make an urgent call. The father orders the immediate shipment of dozens of mana potions directly to the stone bridge construction site. The success of their commercial organization is largely due to this efficient, quick contact system they created. He warns them not to charge anything for the service, and just say that the warrior now owes them a favor. Remy watches everything curiously and asks her father the reason he isn't accepting the payment. The merchant explains that getting a favor and a strong connection with the hero is worth much more than money. The older sister hugs Remy, proud, while the little one asks adorably for even more praise. She starts spinning the little girl in the air from sheer happiness because of the great deal they made. The patriarch lets out a light sigh and watches the scene of affection between the two daughters with a tender smile. But he still wonders how the hero knew about his business plans with such pinpoint precision. He laments that his attempts to return the favor never exactly as planned with the warrior. The man decides to change the subject and asks about what the two talked about so much on the way back. Remy reveals with a smile that she promised to visit the hero's house tomorrow to receive her special gift. The revelation leaves both the father and the sister in a state of shock and absolute panic right away. The father says he permits the visit, but strictly forbids the girl from accepting any kind of gift from him. The girl gets irritated and retorts, saying the warrior made it clear she didn't need to bring anything. The man panics and begs his daughter not to be manipulated so easily by the hero. The sister also tries to intervene, asking with a worried look for Remy to be a good girl and listen. But Remy starts throwing a tantrum, shouting that she will indeed get her gift one way or another. The sister struggles to hold her and warns that the little girl has entered that stubborn and rebellious mode again. The father is stuck, as he knows that forbidding the meeting would be breaking a promise made to the feared hero. In the middle of all that family confusion, the little blonde girl suddenly raises her hands, saying she had an idea. The father decides to postpone the conversation until the wife returns, leaving the final decision for a family meeting.